Story 1. Brother cheats with my girlfriend. They get engaged. But dad disowns them and leaves a twist in his will. So, this happened when I was 17. Back then, I thought everything was pretty normal between me and my family. My older brother Chris was 25, and we'd always been close. I mean, we had to be, especially after our mom passed away when I was about 10. After that, it was just me, Chris, and our dad. Dad did his best to keep everything together. And to be fair, he was a great guy. He worked long hours but always made time for us. Dad was big on teaching us values, stuff like loyalty, honesty, and respect. He drilled into us how important it was to stay loyal to the people you care about. He even told us once, if either of you ever cheats on someone, don't expect me to stand by you. I always took that seriously. I mean, cheating was one of those things he just didn't tolerate. And I figured Chris felt the same way because, like I said, we were close. At the time, I was dating this girl named Ashley. We'd been together for a year, and I honestly thought she was it for me. We hung out all the time, texted each other every night, typical high school stuff. Looking back now, I know it was just young love or whatever, but back then, it felt serious. I really trusted her. She met my dad, came over for family dinners, and even hung out with Chris a lot when she was around. I never thought much of it. She and Chris always seemed to get along, and I was just happy to see them bonding. Anyway, one day I got out of practice early. I was on the track team, and our coach decided to cut the session short that day. Something about getting ready for some event or whatever. So I ended up getting home like an hour earlier than usual. I remember thinking, hey, this is nice. I'll get to relax for a bit before everyone else gets home. I walked through the front door, tossed my bag on the floor, and went straight to the kitchen for a snack. I was thinking about calling Ashley to see if she wanted to hang out or watch a movie. Then I noticed Chris's car was in the driveway. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was usually out at work or hanging with his friends, but I figured he must have had the day off or something. I didn't see him downstairs, so I assumed he was probably just chilling in his room. But as I made my way up the stairs, I heard voices coming from my room. And not just any voices. Chris's and Ashley's. I stopped halfway up the stairs and my stomach kind of dropped. I remember thinking, okay, that's weird. Why are they in my room? I mean, it was my space, you know? No one usually went in there unless I was there too. But I brushed it off at first. Like maybe they were just looking for something, or maybe Chris was showing Ashley some video game or whatever. But then I heard them laughing, and not in a casual way. It sounded different. So I took a deep breath and walked the rest of the way up, trying to ignore the weird feeling building up inside me. I reached the door and pushed it open, and there they were, together, on my bed. And yeah, you know what they were doing. I don't have to spell it out. It was like everything just froze. I stood there staring, and they looked up at me, both with these shocked expressions like they got caught with their hands in the cookie jar or something. Ashley scrambled off the bed, and Chris was just sitting there, looking like he didn't know what to say. And honestly, I was too stunned to react. It was like my brain was trying to catch up to what my eyes were seeing. I mean, Chris, my own brother, and Ashley, the girl I'd been with for a whole year, it was like everything I thought I knew about them just shattered in that moment. I felt this rush of anger, betrayal, and just, I don't know, sadness all at once. I couldn't even get words out at first. They both started talking like they were trying to explain, but none of it made sense. Chris was saying stuff like, man, I'm sorry, we didn't mean for this to happen. And Ashley kept going on about how they had feelings for each other. I just stared at them, feeling my hands shake, and I couldn't believe they were trying to justify it. You didn't mean for this to happen? I remember yelling. Are you kidding me right now? It felt like my whole world just flipped upside down. Chris tried to get off the bed, reaching out like he wanted to apologize, but I stepped back. I wasn't going to let him get close. I told them both to get out of my room and leave me alone. I couldn't deal with looking at them anymore. I remember Ashley saying something like, please, let's talk about this. But I wasn't hearing any of it. I told her we were done. Right there. No hesitation. I mean, what else was there to say? She cheated on me with my own brother of all people. And Chris, I didn't even know what to say to him. It felt like everything between us was just broken. When they finally left the room, I just stood there for a while, staring at the empty space where they had been. It felt unreal, like I'd walked into some messed up version of my own life. I kept replaying everything in my head, thinking about how they'd been sneaking around behind my back and how I never saw it coming. And the worst part was, I couldn't help but wonder how long it had been going on. Had they been lying to me this whole time? I thought about all the times they were hanging out, and I felt like a complete idiot for not seeing the signs. After that, I just kind of collapsed onto the floor. I felt like everything I knew and trusted was gone. I sat there for a while, trying to process what just happened, but my mind was all over the place. The room felt smaller, like it was closing in on me. I couldn't believe that the two people I trusted the most had done this. I knew things would never be the same after that. I couldn't imagine forgiving either of them. I didn't know how I was going to face my brother or what I was going to tell my dad. All I knew was that everything felt messed up, and I just wanted to get as far away from them as possible. So I grabbed my stuff, went downstairs, and left the house. I just needed to get out and clear my head. I wandered around for hours, not knowing where to go or what to do. I didn't want to go back home. I didn't want to see Chris, and I definitely didn't want to run into Ashley again. I felt alone, betrayed, and just lost. Like, how do you even move on from something like that? Looking back now, I wish I could say I handled it better, but honestly, I didn't know what else I could have done. It's not every day you walk in and see your own brother betraying you like that. And at 17, it felt like the end of the world. All I knew was that from that point on, things were never going to be the same, and that's how it all started. After everything went down, I was a wreck. I mean, how could I not be? My own brother and my girlfriend betrayed me in the worst way possible. I didn't know how to process any of it. I felt like I was just running on autopilot, trying to get through each day without thinking too much, but it was impossible. Everywhere I went, I felt like I was constantly reminded of what happened. When I finally made it home that night, Dad was waiting in the kitchen. I guess he could tell something was off because he was already looking at me with this worried expression. Usually he'd just ask how practice was or make small talk about what was for dinner, but this time he was straight to the point. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." At first, I tried to play it off, saying I was just tired and had a rough day. But Dad wasn't buying it. He could always tell when something was up with me. And honestly, I was so overwhelmed that it didn't take long before everything just came spilling out. I didn't even try to hold back. I told him everything, how I walked in on Chris and Ashley, how they tried to apologize, and how I couldn't handle it. I didn't leave out any details. It was like I needed him to understand just how messed up the whole situation was. As I was talking, I could see my dad's face changing. At first, he looked confused, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Then, his expression just shifted to pure anger. He clenched his fists and his face got red, and I knew he was about to blow up. I'd only seen him that mad a few times before, and it was always when someone crossed a line he couldn't forgive. "You're telling me that your own brother did this to you?" he said, his voice all tense. "And with your girlfriend?" I nodded, feeling that anger and betrayal rising up in me again. "Yeah, Dad, that's exactly what happened. I can't even believe it." For a moment, it was just silent between us, like the kind of silence that feels heavier than anything. Dad took a deep breath, and then he just let loose. He started yelling for Chris, calling him down from his room. The whole house felt like it was shaking with the way his voice echoed through the walls. I could hear Chris's footsteps coming down the stairs, and part of me just wanted to disappear because I knew this was about to be a full-on explosion. When Chris finally came into the kitchen, he had that look like he already knew what was coming. He didn't even try to play dumb or act like he didn't know why Dad was mad. Instead, he looked right at me, and I could see this weird mix of regret and frustration on his face. But honestly, I wasn't in the mood to hear anything he had to say. Dad didn't waste any time. He started yelling at Chris, and it was brutal. "How could you do this to your own brother? What the hell were you thinking?" Dad's voice was so loud I thought the neighbors were going to hear. Chris tried to defend himself, but it was weak. "Dad, look, it wasn't planned. It just happened. We have feelings for each other." But Dad cut him off. "Feelings? You call betraying your own family feelings? You know what we've been through, and you still chose to hurt your brother like this?" It was like Dad was channeling all his anger, and honestly, I was right there with him. I wanted to yell too. I wanted to tell Chris how much he'd hurt me, how much he'd destroyed our bond, but I couldn't get the words out. I just stood there, feeling like I was watching everything fall apart. Chris tried again, his voice sounding more desperate. "Dad, it's not like that. We never meant for this to happen. It's just complicated." Dad wasn't having any of it. "There's nothing complicated about loyalty, Chris. You made a choice, and now you're going to face the consequences." And then he dropped the bombshell. He was kicking Chris out of the house, just like that. He pointed to the door and told him to pack his stuff and leave. Chris stood there, stunned, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He looked at me like he was expecting me to say something, to step in or defend him, but I just stared back. I had nothing to say. "Dad, you're really doing this?" Chris asked, his voice shaky. Dad didn't even hesitate. "You betrayed your own brother. You disrespected this family. I don't want you under my roof anymore. Chris didn't argue after that. He just turned and walked up the stairs, and I could hear him slamming stuff around as he packed his things. I stayed in the kitchen, my head spinning. I knew what Chris did was wrong, but seeing Dad actually kick him out, it felt surreal. Part of me felt relieved, like, yeah, he deserved it. But another part of me couldn't believe this was really happening. It was like our family was falling apart right in front of me, and I had no idea how to stop it. After a while, Chris came back down, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't look at me or Dad as he walked toward the door. Before he left, he paused for a second, his hand on the doorknob. If this is how it's going to be, then I'm done with this family, he said, his voice low but cold. I don't need any of you. And then, just like that, he was gone. The door slammed shut, and I was left standing there with Dad, who still looked like he was ready to punch a hole in the wall. I could see the disappointment and hurt in his eyes, and honestly, I felt guilty. I mean, I knew it wasn't my fault, but I couldn't help feeling like I was the reason our family was breaking apart. If I hadn't walked in on them, maybe things would have been different. Dad put a hand on my shoulder, and his voice softened a bit. You did nothing wrong, kid. Chris made his choices, and now he's got to live with them. I nodded, trying to believe it, but it was hard to shake that feeling of everything falling apart. We didn't say much after that. We just sat down for dinner. But the whole time, there was this heavy silence between us. It was weird. Usually it was the three of us, laughing and talking about our day. But now it was just me and Dad, and I could feel the space where Chris used to be. It felt empty. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head. The look on Chris's face when I walked in, the way Dad kicked him out, and the moment Chris walked out the door and said he was done with us. I knew things were going to be different from now on. There was no going back. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but one thing was clear. The family I thought I had was gone, and I had to figure out how to deal with it. A few years went by after everything happened with Chris, and things didn't really get better between us. Honestly, I didn't expect them to. He moved out that night, and we pretty much cut all ties after that. I'd hear bits and pieces about him from our aunt or some mutual friends, but that was about it. Dad and I tried to move on, and for a while, it was just the two of us, making it work as best we could. But then, a couple years ago, Dad got sick. Cancer. At first, we thought it was just a flu or something. He was feeling tired all the time and lost some weight. But when he went to the doctor, they ran a bunch of tests, and the news came back bad. Stage 4. It was already too far along for them to do much, so it was more about managing the symptoms than actually getting better. It was like everything came crashing down again. I mean, after everything that happened, Dad was the one person I still had. He was my rock through all the crap with Chris and Ashley, and now he was the one fading away. I don't think I'd ever felt so scared and helpless in my life. I tried to stay strong for him, though. I figured he needed me to step up, and that's exactly what I did. I drove him to every appointment, stayed with him during the treatments, and did whatever I could to keep his spirits up. We watched a lot of old movies together, played cards, and talked about everything. Well, everything except Chris. That was kind of an unspoken rule between us. Neither of us brought him up, and I think it was easier that way. As Dad's condition got worse, he had to quit work, and I took on a couple of part-time jobs to help cover the bills. It was tough juggling work, school, and taking care of him, but I didn't mind. Dad had done everything for me growing up, and now it was my turn to be there for him. Despite everything, he always tried to keep things light. He'd crack jokes and act like everything was fine, even when I could see he was struggling. It was hard to watch, but I knew he didn't want me worrying too much. That's just how he was, always putting others first, even when he was the one hurting. One day, when things were getting really rough, Dad finally sat me down. Listen, I want you to know how proud I am of you, he said. You've been there for me through all of this, and I couldn't have asked for a better son. I felt a lump in my throat, but I forced a smile and told him, You don't have to thank me, Dad. I'm just doing what you taught me. But deep down, I was breaking apart. I knew what he was trying to say. He was preparing me for when he wouldn't be around anymore. It was only a couple of months after that conversation that Dad passed. It happened at home, with me by his side. I had called our aunt, and she came over to be with us too. It was peaceful, but it still felt like my whole world had been ripped out from under me. He was my last real family, and now I was alone. The funeral was a blur. I remember standing there, surrounded by people. Some I recognized, others I didn't. They all came up to me, offering their condolences and telling me how great a guy my dad was. And they were right. He was. But the whole time, all I could think about was how much I wished he was still here. But you know what hurt the most? Chris didn't even bother to show up. Not a call, not a message, nothing. I hadn't heard from him since the day he walked out, and even when our aunt tried reaching out to let him know what was happening, he ignored it. I kept telling myself that it didn't matter, that it was better that he stayed away, but it still stung. I mean, this was his dad, too. No matter what went down between us, he should have been there, at least for Dad. It felt like he had just erased himself from our lives completely. After the service, we gathered at my aunt's house for a small reception. A few of Dad's old friends shared stories about him, and I tried to smile and nod, but my mind kept drifting back to Chris. I don't know why, but I kept waiting for him to show up, thinking maybe he'd have a change of heart or something. But he never did. Later, we got into sorting out Dad's will. I had no idea what to expect because Dad never really talked about money or his plans. I figured there wouldn't be much left after all the medical bills, but it turned out Dad had some savings and investments I didn't even know about. And it wasn't just a little bit. He'd managed to save up a lot over the years. The lawyer went over everything with me, explaining that Dad had left me pretty much everything. His house, his savings, and the rest of his assets. I was stunned. I knew Dad trusted me, but I never expected to get so much. Then the lawyer mentioned that Dad had also left Chris a small amount. Barely anything compared to what he left me. Enough that Chris couldn't contest it, but not enough to make any real difference in his life. I didn't know how to feel about that. On one hand, it seemed fair, considering Chris never came back or even tried to make things right with Dad. But on the other hand, it felt so final, like Dad was making sure Chris couldn't just show up and take advantage after everything. Our aunt looked at me when the lawyer finished explaining, and she had this sad expression on her face. He really wanted to make sure you were taken care of, she said. He knew you'd be responsible. I nodded, trying to hold back the tears. I felt grateful, but also incredibly lonely. That night, I sat in my old room at my aunt's place, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything. I'd lost my dad. My brother was basically a stranger. And now I was left with this huge responsibility. It felt like my whole life had changed in a matter of months, and I wasn't sure how to handle it. I thought about the times Chris and I spent together as kids, the laughs we shared, the stupid arguments we had, and how we used to have each other's backs. Now, it felt like all of that was gone. And for what? Over a girl who wasn't even around anymore. It all felt so pointless. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Dad was right. Loyalty matters. Family matters. And if Chris didn't want to be a part of that, then maybe I just had to accept it and move on. It hurt, and it felt unfair. But I knew I couldn't change how things turned out. At the end of the day, all I could do was try to honor Dad's memory the best I could and figure out what came next. It was going to be tough, but I knew I owed it to him to keep going no matter how much it hurt. A few weeks after the funeral, I was just starting to figure out how to navigate things without Dad. It wasn't easy, but I was doing my best to manage everything, selling the house, dealing with paperwork, and just trying to move forward. I had a lot on my plate, and honestly, I was keeping busy to avoid thinking too much about how alone I felt. One day, out of nowhere, I got a message from Chris. I hadn't heard from him in years, not a single call, text, or anything after he walked out. It was short and to the point. We need to talk. I remember staring at the screen, feeling all these mixed emotions. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part of me was curious. Why now? What did he want after all this time? I decided to meet up with him at a coffee shop downtown. I figured it was a neutral spot, and if things got heated, at least we wouldn't be at my place or somewhere too personal. When I got there, Chris was already sitting at a table, looking around nervously. He'd changed a lot, looked older, more tired. I could tell life hadn't been easy for him. I sat down, and there was this awkward silence for a minute. Neither of us really knew where to start, and I wasn't about to make the first move. I crossed my arms and waited for him to speak. Finally, he cleared his throat and started talking. So, I heard about Dad, he said, not looking me in the eye. I know I wasn't there, but I'm sorry. I shrugged, not really sure what to say. Yeah, well, it's done now. What do you want, Chris? He seemed to flinch a little, like he wasn't expecting me to be so blunt. Look, I know I wasn't around. I know I messed up, but I'm struggling, man. I heard about the inheritance, and, well, I don't think it's fair that Dad left you everything and almost nothing for me. I felt this anger building up inside me. The nerve of him to come here after all this time and start talking about the money like it was owed to him. Are you serious right now? That's why you wanted to talk? Because of the money? He held up his hands like he was trying to calm me down. Look, I get it. You're mad, and you have every right to be. But I'm your brother, and I need your help. I leaned forward, glaring at him. Brother? You haven't acted like my brother in years, Chris. You bailed on us when things got tough. You didn't even show up when Dad was sick or when he died. And now you want money? He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I know, I know. But things were complicated. Ashley and I were trying to figure things out. And don't even bring her up, I snapped, cutting him off. I don't want to hear any excuses about her or how complicated things were. You made your choice when you walked out. You had years to make things right, and you didn't. You could have picked up the phone, visited Dad, something, but you didn't. Chris looked down at the table, and for a second, I thought maybe he'd actually listen. But then he shook his head and started up again. You're just like Dad, you know that? Always holding grudges. Maybe that's why he left you everything. He was just using that fight as an excuse to favor you. That was it for me. I slammed my hand on the table, and a couple of people nearby turned to stare, but I didn't care. Favor me? Are you kidding? Dad gave you every chance, Chris. He tried to reach out and you pushed him away. You never even tried to fix things. I could see Chris's face harden, and I knew he wasn't getting it. Look, I'm not here to fight. I'm just asking for a little help. Things have been rough, and I thought maybe you'd be willing to share some of the inheritance. I felt like laughing, but it wasn't the kind of laugh where something's funny. It was more like the kind of laugh you do when you're just so fed up with someone's crap that it's all you can do. Share? You want me to share the money Dad left me after everything you did? You didn't even show up for his funeral, Chris. You think you deserve anything after that? He flinched, and for a second, he looked genuinely hurt. I was going through stuff, all right? You have no idea what it's like. No, Chris, I don't. And you know why? Because you shut me out. You made it clear you wanted nothing to do with this family, so don't come crawling back now acting like you're entitled to anything. You weren't there for Dad when he needed you, and you sure as hell weren't there for me. The silence between us was thick. Chris's face was red, and he looked like he wanted to say more, but he held back. I could see it. He was angry, but he also knew he had no ground to stand on. I thought maybe we could start fresh, you know? Move past everything. I shook my head, feeling more exhausted than anything else. I'm not holding a grudge, Chris. I'm just not pretending like everything's fine when you've done nothing to fix what you broke. You made your choice a long time ago. He sighed again, but it was more like a frustrated sigh. Fine, if that's how it's going to be. But just know you're making this about you, not about Dad. I couldn't believe he was trying to spin it that way. This isn't about me, Chris. It's about you taking responsibility for what you did. And if you really think you're entitled to anything after abandoning us, then you're not the brother I used to know. He stood up, pushing his chair back so hard it scraped the floor. All right, I get it. You don't want anything to do with me. But don't come crying to me when you end up just like Dad, bitter and alone. That stung, but I didn't let it show. I just stared at him, keeping my face blank. I'm not the one who walked away, Chris. You did. And if you can't see that, then we're done here. He glared at me one last time before storming out of the coffee shop. I watched him leave, feeling that familiar mix of anger and disappointment. I don't know what I expected, but I guess a part of me hoped he'd come back and genuinely apologize, that maybe we could start fixing things. But he was the same Chris who left years ago, always trying to shift blame and make excuses. I sat there for a while after he left, just staring at the empty seat. Part of me felt relieved that I finally got to say my piece, but another part of me was just tired. Tired of hoping things could go back to the way they were, and tired of pretending like Chris would ever change. At the end of the day, I knew I made the right call. Dad left me what he did for a reason, and Chris wasn't part of that picture anymore. I had to move forward, with or without him. After my blowout with Chris at the coffee shop, I tried to move on. I told myself it was over. I'd said what I needed to say, and if he didn't get it, that was on him. But of course, nothing's ever that simple. A couple of days later, I got a call from our aunt. She'd heard about our argument, and I could tell she wasn't too happy with how things went down. She asked if I could come over to her place to talk. I knew where this was going, but I figured I might as well hear her out. Our aunt had always been kind of like a mediator in the family, trying to keep everyone together even when things got messy. So I agreed, and a couple hours later, I was sitting on her couch, bracing myself for whatever lecture she had prepared. She didn't waste any time. I heard you and Chris had a bit of a fight the other day, she said, giving me that look, like the one she used to give when she was about to tell me I was being unreasonable. Yeah, we talked, I replied, trying to keep my tone casual. But it's not like it changed anything. He still thinks he's entitled to Dad's money, and I'm not about to hand it over just because he's in a tough spot. She sighed, leaning back in her chair. Look, I know you and Chris have a lot of history, And I know what he did was wrong, but he's still your brother. And if you keep holding on to this grudge, you're never going to have a relationship with him. I felt my hands clench into fists, and I had to take a deep breath before I responded. Auntie, it's not about holding a grudge. It's about what he did and how he's acting now. He had years to fix things with Dad, and he didn't. He had years to reach out to me, and he didn't. And now when there's money involved, suddenly he cares? She nodded, but I could see she was still trying to get me to see it from his side. I know it seems like that, but maybe he's reaching out because he finally realizes he made mistakes. Maybe he's just too proud to say it outright. I shook my head. Or maybe he's just saying whatever he thinks will get him the money. I don't trust him, Auntie, not after everything. She looked at me for a moment like she was weighing her next words. You know, when your dad was sick, he always hoped you and Chris would work things out. He told me he wanted you two to have each other, especially after he was gone. That stung. I mean, I knew Dad wanted us to get along. What parent wouldn't? But he also knew what Chris did, and he knew why I was keeping my distance. I know Dad wanted that, but it's not that simple. Chris burned that bridge when he betrayed me, and I'm not going to pretend everything's fine just because he suddenly decides he wants to be brothers again. My aunt sighed again, this time more heavily. I get it. And I'm not saying you have to forgive him right away or even give him any money. But don't shut him out completely. If you close that door, you might regret it later. I didn't say anything for a while. I just stared at the floor, thinking about everything. Part of me knew she was right. Holding on to all this anger wasn't exactly healthy, but another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that Chris was only reaching out because he had something to gain. Look, Auntie, I get what you're saying, I finally said, but he made his choice. I'm not closing the door, but I'm not letting him walk back in like nothing happened either. He has to show he's actually sorry, not just because he wants money. She didn't look entirely satisfied, but she nodded. Fair enough. Just promise me you'll think about it, okay? I promised. But in my head, I was already pretty set. I wasn't going to change my mind just because Chris suddenly decided to show up. If he wanted to be part of my life, he was going to have to earn that. A few days later, I got another message from Chris. This time, it was longer. He said he'd thought about what I said and wanted to try to fix things between us, but he still mentioned the inheritance. I don't want all of it, he wrote, but maybe you could help me out a bit, just a loan or something. I stared at the message for a while, my finger hovering over the reply button. A loan? After everything? I felt that anger bubbling up again, but I took a breath. Maybe he really was desperate. But then I remembered how he looked at the coffee shop, how he kept trying to justify what he did, and how he still tried to blame me and Dad for everything going wrong in his life. I put my phone down without replying. I wasn't going to get dragged into this again. If Chris wanted to fix things, he needed to do it without bringing up the money every time. I wasn't going to be some ATM for him to run to whenever he was struggling. The next day, I got a call from our aunt again. She asked if I'd thought about what she said. I told her I did, but my mind hadn't changed. I want to see him try for real, Auntie. If he can't do that without bringing up money, then I don't know what to tell you. She sighed, and I could tell she was disappointed, but she didn't push me further. All right, just keep an open mind, okay? After that, I didn't hear from Chris for a while. I focused on my own life, trying to get everything in order. I got a new job, moved to a different apartment, and started building my own life outside of all the drama. It felt good to have a fresh start, even if a part of me still felt that nagging ache whenever I thought about how things ended with Chris. I think the hardest part was feeling like I'd lost my brother for good. We used to be so close, and now it was like we were strangers. I'd see other people hanging out with their siblings, and it had hit me. Chris and I would probably never have that again, not unless he really changed. But at the same time, I knew I had to stand by my decision. If I let him walk all over me now, what kind of message would that send? That he could betray me and our dad, disappear for years, and then just come back when it was convenient for him? I wasn't going to let that happen. In the end, I knew I was making the right choice, even if it didn't feel great. Sometimes sticking to your boundaries is the hardest thing to do, especially when it involves family. But I knew if Dad were still around, he'd tell me to stay strong and not let anyone take advantage of me. So that's what I did. I moved forward with my life, holding on to the hope that maybe one day Chris would actually understand what he did and try to make things right, not for the money, but because he really wanted to be brothers again. Until then, I was done giving him chances. Story 2. I received a court summons. My brother's wife falsely claimed I SA'd her kids, my own family sided with her, and my mom called me disgusting. But now the truth is out, and they want to reconcile. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Alright, look. I'm gonna be straight with you degenerates. This story's gonna piss you off, make you question everything you thought you knew about the legal system, and hopefully remind you why you should never ignore red flags. I'm 39 now, work as a data analyst, and I've been flying solo for 8 years by choice. Not because I can't pull, I can. Just choose not to deal with the modern relationship circus anymore. Too much drama, too many games, too many ways for shit to explode when you try to walk away. I'd rather crank Metallica, hit the gym until my shoulders scream, and live my life without someone constantly poking at my boundaries to see what breaks. But this cluster shit started when my younger brother Derek hit the tech lottery, and I could smell the vultures circling from miles away. Derek's 34 and had been grinding through startup hell for years, living on ramen and false hope like every other code monkey in Silicon Valley. He's got full custody of 2 kids from his previous marriage, Eliza and Jake, after his ex moved across the country for work. So he's been doing the single dad thing while trying to build his career. Then his blockchain company got bought by Microsoft for stupid money. We're talking retire at 34 and buy an island cash. I wasn't bitter about it. Derek's a solid dude who deserved some luck. I've got my own place, decent savings, built my life brick by brick over 20 years of grinding. But I knew what happens when average guys suddenly start swimming in cash. Every parasite within a 50-mile radius starts sniffing around. Derek went full nouveau riche immediately. Designer everything. Tesla that cost more than most people's houses. Penthouse downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows. Classic new money moves. His choice, whatever. Then that girl, I'll call her Sophia, slithered into the picture. They met 6 months after his windfall. She claimed to be a freelance photographer, but carried herself like old money royalty. Perfect everything. Makeup that probably took an hour. Purse that cost more than my motorcycle. Nails done weekly like clockwork. Said she was between apartments while building her artistic portfolio. But her bad luck? She ran into someone who can spot walking red flags like a hawk at 3,000 feet. I've seen her type before. Twice, actually. So yeah, I knew exactly what I was looking at. Here's the thing about professional gold diggers. They're not the stereotypical trailer park trash with daddy issues. The elite ones are sophisticated predators who study their prey like scientists. They understand psychology, they research targets, and they move with surgical precision. Derek was hooked from conversation 1. Started babbling about this incredible woman who understood his creative vision during family dinners. What freaking creative vision. Dude writes database queries and binges Netflix. Look, I've been around the block enough times to recognize certain patterns. The way some people casually probe your financial situation during small talk. How they gradually escalate their requests once they think they've got leverage. The subtle manipulation tactics that most guys miss completely because they're distracted by other factors. Sophia triggered every alarm bell in my head, and I never liked her ever since Derek first introduced her to us. The rest of the family ate up her act completely, though. My parents thought she was such a sweet girl, and perfect for Derek. My sister kept gushing about how classy and sophisticated Sophia was compared to Derek's previous wife. Even extended family members were constantly asking when Derek was going to propose to his wonderful new girlfriend. She moved in after 2 weeks, claimed her housing situation suddenly fell through, and she needed temporary shelter. Weird how her photography equipment never materialized, though. No cameras, no lighting rigs, no editing setup, nothing that screamed professional artist. When I asked about her actual work, she gave these vague responses about lifestyle photography and personal branding. The money conversation started immediately, too. She'd casually mention expensive restaurants she used to frequent before circumstances changed. Talk about missing her old BMW like it was a dead relative. Drop hints about her friend's boyfriend surprising her with expensive jewelry. Never direct demands. Too smart for that amateur bullshit, but always planting seeds about what quality men provide for their women. At Christmas dinner, I caught her Googling Derek Chen net worth Microsoft buyout on her phone. Not even trying to be subtle about it. Just straight up researching the exact size of her target's bank account. When she noticed me watching, she switched to Instagram like nothing happened. That moment confirmed everything I suspected. This woman was a professional hunter, and my brother was walking around with a bullseye painted on his forehead. The thing is, I tried warning Derek multiple times. But guys don't listen when they're getting regular action and ego validation from someone attractive. Logic bounces right off that hormone shield. Dude, she moved in after 2 weeks and hasn't contributed a single dollar to any expenses, I told him during one of our gym sessions. Claims to be a photographer but owns zero equipment. Think about what that means. You don't understand our dynamic, he'd respond, while benching twice his usual weight. She's been hurt before by guys who didn't appreciate her art. She needs time to feel secure before opening up. Classic response. When Derek gets caught up in the romance and attention, he'll rationalize literally anything to avoid admitting he's being played. So I backed off and watched from the sidelines. Sometimes you gotta let people make their own mistakes and learn from the consequences. Can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. But I was ready for when the whole thing inevitably went sideways. After all, he's my brother. After New Year's, Sophia started pushing boundaries harder. Needed keys to Derek's place for convenience. He told me that she wanted access to his Amazon account to order supplies for her work. Small incremental steps toward financial control that Derek didn't recognize. She cornered me at Derek's New Year's party. Massive event, probably 50 people. She worked that room like a seasoned politician, making sure everyone understood she belonged to the guy with money. Marcus, Derek talks about you constantly. How protective you've always been. Fake smile, hand on my arm. Textbook manipulation bullshit. It's really sweet how much you care about him. I kept my response simple. Just want what's best for my brother. Of course you do. I think there might be some misunderstandings about my intentions, though. The smile stayed perfect, but her eyes went arctic. I love Derek deeply. I'm not going anywhere. Good to know. I really hope we can develop a friendship. It would be so unfortunate if Derek ever had to choose between his girlfriend and his brother. There it was. The threat wrapped in fake sweetness. This bee was declaring war while pretending to want peace. I started paying way closer attention after that conversation. Noticed how she deflected any questions about her past. No stories about family, childhood memories, previous relationships, nothing personal. When people asked about her photography business, she'd immediately pivot to talking about Derek's success. Professional level deflection. Her financial requests got more aggressive and strategic too. Car repairs that cost exactly what Derek had mentioned investing last week. Sister's medical emergency that required precisely the amount of his quarterly bonus. Always urgent emotional crises that demanded immediate financial solutions. By spring, she was floating the idea of joint bank accounts. Started suggesting how generous it would be if Derek helped her parents with their mortgage payments during family dinners. Really touching how much she cared about family financial security, right? Most guys never see girls like Sophia coming, because they don't charge in swinging. They chip away slowly. It's calculated. They ease into your life, test limits, normalize the idea of covering for them just this once. They don't take control all at once. They make you hand it over piece by piece. One small request turns into full-blown financial access before you even realize you've been cornered. But Derek's not completely brain dead. The constant financial pressure finally triggered his suspicion circuits. He showed up at my place one evening looking high. I think I screwed up big time with Sophia. How so? I've been tracking our expenses because something felt off. She claims she's broke, but she's spending constantly. Professional skincare that costs more than my car payment, $8 coffee every morning, weekly nail appointments that run $80. Either she's lying about being poor, or money's coming from somewhere else. I stayed quiet. Let him work through the logic himself. And when I asked to see her actual photography portfolio, real work she's done, she got defensive as hell. Said I was being controlling, that real artists don't perform on demand for skeptical boyfriends. He looked completely defeated. Marcus, I don't think she's actually a photographer. I think she's been playing me this whole time. What's your plan? I asked. Already expected this coming. Confront her directly. Ask hard questions and demand honest answers. If she's lying about her career, what else has been bullshit? I felt genuinely bad for him. Derek's a decent guy who'd been completely broken after his divorce. His previous ex left him to raise 2 kids alone. When Sophia showed up giving him attention and validation, he was vulnerable as hell. He'd been thinking with his emotions for 8 months straight, desperate to believe someone actually cared about him again. Reality was finally cutting through his hormone fog. Be careful when you corner her. People get nasty when their scams get exposed, I said. I had absolutely no idea how nasty this particular person could get. The confrontation went down 2 days later. Derek finally asked the hard questions about money and her supposed career. She tried every manipulation tactic in the book. Tears, victim playing, threats to leave. But Derek held firm this time and demanded actual proof of her stories. When that didn't work, she tried redirecting blame onto me. started making wild accusations about how I'd been undermining their relationship and acting inappropriately toward her. Complete lies, but she sold them with conviction. Derek saw through it and kicked her out that night. Cut off her access, changed the locks, told her to disappear. I found out about all this because he called me afterward, shaken up and apologizing for almost believing her garbage about me. I thought that was the end of our Sophia problem. Shows how badly I underestimated what a vindictive psycho does when her meal ticket gets yanked away. 3 days after Derek tossed her out, someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find two Child Protective Services investigators and a cop holding official paperwork. Marcus Chen, we need to discuss some very serious accusations that have been made against you. My brain completely short-circuited. Accusations about what exactly? Inappropriate sexual behavior with minors. We've received detailed reports about questionable conduct with Derek Chen's children during family gatherings. Let me be crystal clear about something. I don't like kids. Never have. Probably never will. I tolerate Derek's kids because they're blood family, but I'm definitely not the uncle volunteering for babysitting duty. I help with homework when specifically asked, play video games with them occasionally. Basic family obligation stuff. The idea that I'd want inappropriate contact with children is absolutely ridiculous to anyone who actually knows me. This has to be some kind of mistake. Who filed these reports? Anonymous tip received 3 days ago with very detailed information. You need to come to the station for formal questioning, the cop said. 3 days ago. Exactly 72 hours after Derek kicked Sophia out of his life. The accusations were incredibly detailed and specific. Inappropriate touching during family gatherings, secret conversations with the children, using gifts to keep them quiet about our special relationship. Someone had clearly researched exactly how to make these charges sound credible and stick. But here's the thing that absolutely destroyed me. They said that Derek filed supporting criminal charges. My own flesh and blood brother submitted an official police report for child endangerment based entirely on his psychotic ex-girlfriend's word. Not just cooperating with an investigation, actively pushing for my prosecution on felony charges that could mean serious prison time. They hauled me into an interview room in the basement of the downtown precinct. I sat there, listening to detectives read accusations about inappropriate sexual contact with my own nephew and niece. I realized how completely screwed my life had just become. Such accusations involving children aren't like other types of lies. There's no gray area, no benefit of the doubt. You're either completely innocent or you're a monster. And proving you didn't do something is virtually impossible. They didn't waste any time turning my life upside down. As soon as they let me go after that first round of just preliminary questioning, a team showed up at my apartment with a search warrant, watched them tear through everything I owned while neighbors peered out their windows. Then came the phone calls. My boss demanding I come in immediately. My parents asking what the hell was going on. My dad got in full freakout mode, practically shouting through the phone, "What the hell did you do?" Just full-blown panic, like I'd personally dropped a nuke on the family name. I tried to explain, tried to get even a single sentence out about how this was all retaliation from Sophia, how the accusations were fake. Didn't even get the words formed before my mom cut in. Maybe if you'd minded your own damn business instead of constantly interfering in Derek's relationship, none of this would have happened to begin with. Look what you've done. You're disgusting creep, Marcus. I'm ashamed of you. My own mother didn't believe me and didn't even listen to me. She was actually blaming me. All. Because I'd tried to protect my brother from a gold-digging predator. I stayed silent because she didn't give me a chance to defend myself. Last thing she said, stay away from this family until you get your life sorted out, and hung up. That's when I finally realized my family wasn't just failing to support me. They were actively choosing the comfortable lie over the uncomfortable truth because it was easier for them to believe I was guilty than admit they'd been completely wrong about Sophia. My entire world crashing down in real time. The legal machine moved fast once it got rolling. They seized all my computers and electronics, searched every inch of my apartment, interviewed neighbors about my behavior around children, put me on immediate administrative leave from work pending the investigation outcome, got a court restraining order saying I couldn't be within 500 feet of schools, playgrounds, daycares, or anywhere children might be present, like I was out here dying to hang around sticky-fingered goblins in the first place. In less than 48 hours, I went from successful data analyst to suspected child predator, all because I'd tried to warn my brother about his manipulative girlfriend. And the worst part? Derek knew exactly what Sophia was capable of. He'd just spent weeks discovering her lies and manipulation tactics. But when she aimed those same weapons at me, he chose to believe every word she said. My own brother picked his lying psycho ex-girlfriend over me. while my buddy Big Jake was the only person who stood by me during this nightmare. We've been tight since college, and he knew the accusations were complete bullshit immediately. I hold mad respect for you, bro. Dude, you barely tolerate kids on your best days, he said, when I called him having a complete panic attack. You literally avoid family events when there's gonna be screaming children everywhere. This is obviously revenge from that gold-digging psycho. Big Jake was absolutely right. I'm not a kid person at all. Find them irritating and exhausting most of the time. I'm polite to Eliza and Jake because they're Derek's offspring, but I don't actively seek out time with them. I taught Jake to throw a decent spiral last summer, played some Mario Kart with Eliza a few times. Normal uncle interactions that any reasonable person would recognize as completely innocent. But that's the evil genius of false accusations. They don't have to make logical sense to people who know you. They just have to sound plausible enough to strangers making life-altering decisions about your future. Once the investigation officially started, my entire existence became a living hell. Had to hire a criminal defense attorney who specializes in these cases. Cost me $45,000 upfront just to get representation. He warned me these situations can drag on for years and cost exponentially more before resolution. But that court restraining order was absolutely devastating. Had to immediately move out of my apartment because there was an elementary school 4 blocks away. Try finding decent housing when background checks reveal an active investigation for child-related crimes. Ended up in a shitty studio apartment paying month-to-month rent because no legitimate property management company would lease to me. Landlord was some sketchy guy who didn't ask too many questions, as long as I paid cash upfront every month. Work became exponentially worse immediately. HR called me in for a meeting about the extremely concerning allegations they'd heard about through official channels. Tried explaining it was obviously revenge from a vindictive ex, but company policy was absolute zero tolerance for anything involving children. Terminated on the spot, no severance package, no unemployment benefits. I literally lost everything. 20 years of building a solid career, completely destroyed overnight. All my professional references were poisoned because everyone in the industry knew exactly why I got fired. My entire family obviously abandoned me without hesitation. My sister immediately blocked my phone number when I tried calling to explain the situation. Extended family just vanished completely. Nobody wanted any association with the family child molester. And of course, Derek played the protective father role perfectly for everyone watching. Told the whole family how incredibly difficult this situation was for him personally, and how he absolutely had to prioritize his children's safety above everything else. Made himself the primary victim while actively helping prosecutors build their case against me. The investigation dragged on for months. 9 freaking months of my life stuck in complete limbo, while forensic experts analyzed every byte of data on my computers, interviewed literally everyone I'd ever known, and searched desperately for evidence of crimes that never happened. My lawyer laid out the brutal reality during our first meeting. If convicted on all charges, 2 counts of child SA in the first degree, 1 count of exploitation of a minor, I was looking at 15 to 30 years in federal prison, minimum. With the enhancement for being a family member, they could push for the maximum sentence. At 36 years old, that meant I'd get out when I was retirement age, if I made it that long. The prosecutor's office takes such cases very seriously, my lawyer explained. They have a 78% conviction rate in these kinds of cases. Even if we can create reasonable doubt, juries tend to err on the side of protecting children. We need ironclad evidence of your innocence, not just holes in their case. So we spent months desperately trying to build some kind of defense. My lawyer subpoenaed everything: Derek's phone records, family gathering photos with timestamps, my work schedule to prove I was nowhere near the kids during alleged incidents. We interviewed every family member who'd been at gatherings where I'd interacted with Eliza and Jake. I was definitely disgusted through all this, for this shit to even be associated with me. And the problem was, Sophia had been smart about her timeline. She'd placed the alleged incidents during periods when it was just family time. No specific events, no clear alibis, just general interactions over months. How do you prove you didn't touch a kid inappropriately during a normal family barbecue 8 months ago? Meanwhile, she was playing the concerned stepmother role flawlessly, although she was just a girlfriend. She'd voluntarily testified 3 times, each session more detailed than the last. Her story was crafted perfectly, not too detailed to be obviously fabricated, but specific enough to sound credible. The prosecutor loved her. A brave woman coming forward to protect innocent children from a predatory family member. She was their star witness, and she knew exactly how to play the part. Eliza and Jake were interviewed multiple times by child psychology specialists. Thank God they're honest kids, because their testimony was the only thing keeping me from being completely buried. They consistently described normal uncle interactions, helping with homework, playing video games, teaching Jake Jr. to throw a football. No inappropriate touching, no secret conversations, no fear or discomfort. But here's the nightmare of these cases. Even when kids deny abuse, prosecutors can argue they're protecting their abuser or too traumatized to tell the truth. The absence of evidence becomes evidence of how manipulative the abuser is. Outside the legal system, it was no better. My neighbors started treating me like I had a biohazard sticker on my forehead. Parents would yank their kids inside the moment I walked by. One paranoid soccer mom actually called the cops on me for lurking near a playground. I was just walking to the damn grocery store. Month after month dragged by with no progress. The prosecution kept requesting delays to gather additional evidence. My lawyer suspected they knew their case was weak, but were hoping something new would surface. I was living in limbo. Couldn't work, couldn't do anything to prove to my mom that I'm innocent. Every court appearance was psychological warfare. Sitting there while the prosecutor described in graphic detail what I'd allegedly done to children I loved, watching Sophia dab her eyes with tissues while spinning her lies, seeing Derek in the gallery, supporting her version of events. The worst was a preliminary hearing where they read the full accusations out loud. 20 people in that courtroom heard every disgusting detail of what I supposedly did. The court reporter typing it all up for the official record. My name permanently attached to those words. Through all this, Big Jake became my only lifeline during this period. Brought groceries when I couldn't handle facing the public. Helped with job applications when I couldn't focus long enough to complete them. Most importantly, he never once doubted my innocence or made me feel like a burden. This is straight up character assassination, he'd say, while we lifted weights in his garage. That psychotic bitch knew exactly which buttons to push to completely destroy your life, but the truth always comes out eventually. He was giving me some hope, despite seeing no signs. By month 7, I was ready to take a plea deal. My lawyer had found inconsistencies in Sophia's timeline, but nothing decisive. The prosecution offered 7 years if I pled guilty to lesser charges. Inappropriate touching instead of full essay. 7 years versus potentially 30, my lawyer said. It's not an admission of guilt. It's a business decision. You'd be out in 4 with good behavior. I was seriously considering it. 7 years seemed manageable compared to life in prison. At least I'd still have some years left when I got out. But let me tell you, the only thing that kept me functional through all this was pure burning rage. Absolute fury at Sophia for what she'd done to me, and soul-crushing disappointment in Derek that felt like actual physical pain in my chest. This wasn't some random psychopath targeting me for kicks. This was my own brother choosing to believe the absolute worst possible interpretation of me, rather than admit he'd been completely played by a manipulative cunt. But I'm a stubborn bastard who doesn't stay down when someone tries to destroy me. While I was literally struggling, I was planning my comeback. After 9 months of this nightmare, my lawyer called with news that changed absolutely everything. Investigators had uncovered Sophia's complete digital trail, and it was more damning than we'd dared hope. Her browser history read like a step-by-step instruction manual for filing accusations. How to file convincing reports with Child Protective Services. Making child endangerment accusations stick in court. Removing unwanted family members through government agencies. What evidence do prosecutors need for successful child abuse cases? She'd literally Googled detailed instructions for systematically framing me. The smoking gun came when my lawyer's investigator tracked down Sophia's roommate through social media and lease records. Initially, she refused to talk, but once my lawyer explained I was facing 30 years for crimes I didn't commit, her conscience kicked in. She handed over text messages between her and Sophia from 4 days before Sophia filed the report. Messages explicitly discussing getting rid of Marcus permanently and making sure Derek never speaks to his toxic brother again. She'd screenshot them thinking Sophia was just venting family drama. Had no idea she was planning to file false criminal charges. Even the most biased prosecutors couldn't ignore that level of calculated premeditation. Her story kept changing dramatically during follow-up interviews with investigators. Originally claimed the incidents happened at family gatherings with multiple witnesses present, then switched to saying I'd taken Jake to my apartment alone several times, except building security footage proved he'd never once been to my place. Then claimed I'd given Eliza a secret cell phone to contact me privately, except phone company records showed no such device had ever existed. Each new version contradicted all the previous ones. Textbook sign of someone frantically making shit up as they go along. The final nail was the timeline. She filed her detailed report exactly 72 hours after Derek ended their relationship and cut off her financial access. The fact that she'd lived with Derek and his kids for 8 straight months, watching every routine, every interaction, and never once raised a concern until the exact moment her financial safety net vanished, wasn't just suspicious. It was damning. My lawyer presented the complete evidence package to the lead prosecutor in a meeting that lasted over 3 hours. Digital evidence of premeditation, text messages proving revenge motive, timeline inconsistencies, and Sophia's constantly changing story. He called me the next morning with the words I'd been praying to hear for 9 months. All charges are being dropped immediately and permanently. The investigation has officially concluded that the accusations were malicious fabrications designed specifically to cause personal harm. I hung up and just sat there staring at the wall for straight 20 minutes. No tears, no celebration, no fist pumping. Just nothing. You'd think I'd be jumping around my crappy studio apartment calling everyone. Instead, I felt like someone had just told me the cancer was gone, but I'd already lost both legs. I mean, yeah, I was legally cleared of all wrongdoing, but the damage to my life was already permanent and irreversible. You can't undo 9 months of systematic reputation destruction. That rage never settled, and I was about to go fucking nuclear against everyone stood against me. I tried going back to my previous company, but they'd permanently filled my position and showed zero interest in rehiring someone with concerning legal history. Other firms in the industry had heard about the investigation through professional gossip networks. Background checks still prominently displayed the investigation details, even though all charges were dropped. HR departments don't distinguish between charges dropped and proven innocent. Both look equally problematic on paper. So, it took me 8 agonizing months to find decent work again, and it represented a massive step backward career-wise. Much smaller company, 30% pay cut, basically restarting my entire professional life at 37 years old. All because some psychopathic gold digger decided to weaponize child abuse accusations for personal revenge. Derek attempted reconciliation after the complete truth came out, showing up at my apartment with this pathetic, half-assed apology about how he'd been forced to protect his children and hoped I could somehow understand his impossible position. No, I absolutely do not understand your position. You spineless fucking coward. You chose to believe your manipulative, gold-digging ex-girlfriend over your own flesh and blood brother. You didn't just fail to support me during the worst period of my life. You actively collaborated with prosecutors trying to send me to prison for child SA. The kids really miss you, he said with fake sincerity. Eliza asks about Uncle Marcus constantly. Then why exactly can't I see them? Well, my new girlfriend is uncomfortable with the whole history. She thinks it would be better if we waited until significantly more time passes. There it freaking was. Even now, I'm still being punished and treated like a dangerous predator. Derek wants convenient reconciliation where I pretend everything's totally normal while accepting that I'll never have a regular relationship with his children again. Wants me to be grateful he's graciously willing to speak to me while maintaining that I'm still too risky to be around kids. I told him we were permanently finished. Some betrayals simply cannot be forgiven, and some bridges can't be rebuilt once you've burned them to ash. But Sophia? She thought she was completely safe now, got her substantial divorce settlement money, moved to a different city to start fresh, probably already hunting for her next wealthy victim. She was dead effing wrong about being safe. Big Jake helped me research every possible legal option for getting real justice. You absolutely cannot let that psychotic bitch just walk away from this shit, he said while we were working on his Harley in his garage. She cost you hundreds of thousands in legal fees, lost income, and permanent reputation damage. There have to be serious consequences. He was absolutely right. I found a lawyer who specializes in suing people for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and malicious abuse of legal processes. Cost me another $25,000 upfront for representation. But this wasn't just about recovering money anymore. This was about ensuring that actions have real consequences. The beautiful thing about civil court proceedings is that you don't need proof beyond reasonable doubt like criminal cases require. You just need to demonstrate that it's more likely than not that someone deliberately lied and caused measurable damages. We had mountains of irrefutable evidence. Her complete browser history showing systematic research into filing false reports. Text message conversations explicitly discussing plans to destroy me. The suspicious timeline proving she filed immediately after Derek dumped her. Her constantly changing and contradictory story during the investigation. The prosecutor's official written conclusion that her accusations were malicious lies designed to cause maximum harm. We documented every single penny of damage she'd caused to my life. Legal fees totaling $73,000. Lost income from unemployment and career setback totaling $180,000. Moving expenses, mandatory therapy costs, damaged credit scores from unemployment. Everything added up to $340,000 in direct, documentable damages. But I wasn't stopping at just recovery. I wanted substantial punitive damages for the intentional emotional harm, systematic destruction of reputation, and deliberate abuse of the legal system. We were going for the maximum amount allowed under state law. The case took 18 grueling months to work through the court system. Sophia hired some expensive downtown lawyer and tried every possible defense strategy they could think of. Claimed she genuinely believed the accusations were true based on concerning behavioral patterns she'd observed. Said she was courageously protecting innocent children from potential harm. Argued that Derek filing criminal charges proved her concerns were completely credible and justified. None of her bullshit worked. The evidence was absolutely overwhelming that she deliberately fabricated everything for personal revenge. The major breakthrough came when we deposed her roommate under oath during discovery. This girl broke down and admitted that Sophia had explicitly described her detailed plan to completely destroy Derek's brother, using false child SA allegations. Apparently, Sophia had been quite proud of her sophisticated strategy, bragging about how she'd researched the most effective methods to permanently ruin someone's entire life. Big Jake attended every single court hearing, taking detailed notes and providing unwavering moral support. This is real justice finally working the way it's supposed to. He'd say after each session. The jury deliberated for 6 tense hours before returning their unanimous verdict. Guilty on all counts of defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and malicious abuse of legal process. Total damages awarded, $850,000. More than double what we'd originally requested. The judge's closing comments were particularly satisfying, and I quote, "The defendant's actions represent a calculated and malicious attempt to destroy an innocent person's entire life through systematic abuse of our legal system. Such behavior cannot and will not be tolerated in this courtroom." But the problem is, Sophia didn't have $850,000 just sitting around waiting to be claimed. So we immediately started garnishing her wages directly from the source. 25% of every single paycheck, automatically deducted before she even sees the money. I placed legal liens on any property she attempts to purchase. If she receives inheritance in the future or divorce settlement, which I know this bitch will, we're first in line to collect. She desperately tried declaring bankruptcy to escape the judgment, but you legally cannot discharge court awards for intentional wrongdoing and deliberate harm. This debt follows her forever, until death or full payment. Big Jake helped me track her current financial situation through public records and court filings. She's currently working retail management at some department store chain, making approximately $45,000 annually. After we take our legal cut plus normal taxes, she brings home maybe $2,800 monthly. Try maintaining any kind of gold digger lifestyle on that pathetic budget. The absolute part that satisfies the hell out of me? Every single time she applies for credit, seeks a new job, or tries to rent somewhere decent, our massive court judgment shows up prominently on all background checks. Potential employers and landlords immediately see that she owes nearly $1 million for filing false child abuse accusations against an innocent person. But here's the thing this whole experience fundamentally changed about me. It made me infinitely harder, more cynical, and less trusting of literally everyone. I don't give anyone the benefit of the doubt anymore. Don't assume good intentions from anyone. Derek's ultimate betrayal taught me that even blood family will throw you directly under the bus when supporting you becomes socially inconvenient. The accusations still follow me around like a shadow, despite being completely vindicated and proven innocent. Potential employers still Google my name and find articles about the investigation. Even though I was totally cleared, even though Sophia was definitively exposed as a lying, manipulative gold digger, the reputational damage remains permanent. Derek still sends holiday cards every year asking for reconciliation and family healing, wants to move past this unfortunate situation and restore family harmony for everyone's benefit. Eliza and Jake are full teenagers now. They probably barely remember Uncle Marcus, who used to help with difficult homework and taught them various card games. That reality hurts me more than anything else. Losing meaningful relationships with kids I actually cared about because their father chose to believe a manipulative psychopath over his own brother. My parents occasionally suggest through other family members that I should let bygones be bygones for the sake of family unity and moving forward. Real easy for them to say, especially after they didn't even listen to me while I was trying to defend myself. But I sleep peacefully every single night, knowing that the gold digger faces real consequences for her actions every day of her life. Every time she receives a paycheck and sees that money automatically deducted. Every time she applies for credit and gets immediately rejected. Every time she tries to move forward with her life and her malicious past catches up with her. Some people think I'm being vindictive and should move on, that I should have accepted the criminal case dismissal and focused on rebuilding my life. Those people have never had their entire existence destroyed by lies. They've never watched their own family choose comfortable fiction over uncomfortable truth because it's easier to believe. Big Jake perfectly summarizes the situation. You didn't just win money back, you sent a clear message to every other psychotic gold digger out there. The monthly garnishment payments remind Sophia of that message every single month for the next 3 decades. Story 3. This story is titled, My Wife Believes Her Toxic Best Friend's Lies Over Me, Destroying Our Marriage. When the truth came out, she tried to reconcile, but it was too late. Hi everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and make sure you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. So, I'm 35, living in Denver, and I just finalized my divorce from my wife, Emma. We were together for 6 years, married for 2. Looking back, I feel like I should have seen this train wreck coming. Honestly, the warning signs were there from the start, but I kept ignoring them because, well, I loved her. Or at least, I thought I did. The cracks in our relationship had a name, Stacy, Emma's best friend. You ever meet someone and immediately know they're bad news? That was Stacy. She was loud, self-centered, and always had to be the center of attention. From the first time I met her, I felt like she was sizing me up, like she was looking for something to hold against me. But Emma was blind to it. She saw Stacy as her ride or die from college, someone who'd been there through thick and thin. I thought, fine, I'll tolerate her because she's important to Emma. But man, Stacy knew how to push buttons. Things really started going downhill during our wedding plan. I proposed to Emma after 3 years of dating. We were living together by then, and it just felt like the next step. She was ecstatic, and honestly, so was I. At first. Then Stacy started sticking her nose in. It started small. She didn't like our color scheme and said it was too basic. I let that slide because who cares what colors we picked? Then she made a fuss about the catering, saying we needed vegan options because half the guests would probably prefer that. There were maybe 2 vegans total. And she ended up demanding that she walk down the aisle in a special moment ahead of the bridesmaids. Yeah, you read that right. Stacy wanted her own walk down the aisle. Her reasoning? I've been there through every one of Emma's breakups, every hard moment in her life. This day is about celebrating the people who stood by her, not just the marriage. I thought it was a joke at first. Like, who seriously asks for that? But Emma just kind of nodded along. I could see her caving in real time. I tried to step in. I told Emma, look, this is our wedding, not a stage for Stacy to perform on. Your sister's already your maid of honor, and that's enough. Emma got defensive, saying I was making a big deal out of nothing. Stacy, meanwhile, acted like I'd personally insulted her entire existence. Wow, she said. I didn't realize your fiancé was so controlling. That stung. But instead of standing up for me, Emma folded. It's just one little thing, she told me later. If it makes her happy, what's the harm? So Stacy got her grand entrance. She strutted down the aisle like it was her wedding. I could feel my parents' side-eye from the front row, but I just gritted my teeth and smiled for the photos. I figured once we're married, this kind of nonsense will stop. Stacy won't have as much of a say in our lives. Big mistake. Huge. After the wedding, Stacy didn't just fade into the background like I'd hoped. If anything, she became even more involved in our lives. Emma and I would be talking about weekend plans, and Stacy's name would pop up like clockwork. Oh, I already told Stacy she could join us, Emma would say. Or, Stacy thinks we should check out this restaurant instead. It was like we couldn't make a single decision without her input. I tried to bring it up to Emma, gently at first. I told her, look, I like that you have a close friend, but I feel like Stacy's a little too involved in our lives. Can we set some boundaries? Emma got defensive again. She's my best friend, she said. I can't just shut her out. You don't understand how much she's done for me. Maybe I didn't understand. I wasn't there for the college years or the breakups or whatever, but what I did understand was that Stacy didn't respect me or our marriage, and Emma was too wrapped up in their friendship to see it. I wanted to believe that Stacy wasn't intentionally trying to undermine me. Maybe she was just one of those people who didn't know how to take a step back. But deep down, I think I knew better. Stacy didn't like me, plain and simple. And the more she inserted herself into our lives, the more obvious it became. I don't know why I didn't put my foot down earlier. Maybe I thought it wasn't worth the fight, or maybe I didn't want to risk pushing Emma away. But that was my mistake. By staying quiet, I let Stacy feel like she had the right to interfere in our marriage. And by the time I realized how deep her claws were, it was too late. About a year into our marriage, Emma and I had finally settled into a routine. Work, date nights, binging TV shows on weekends. Things weren't perfect, but they were good. Peaceful even. That was until Stacy showed up at our doorstep, sobbing like her entire world had fallen apart. It was a Friday evening. Emma and I were planning to make tacos and maybe watch a movie. I was halfway through chopping onions when the doorbell rang. Emma went to get it, and within seconds I heard Stacy's wailing. I poked my head around the corner, and there she was, clinging to Emma like a shipwreck survivor. She had a duffel bag slung over her shoulder and mascara running down her face. "He left me," Stacy cried. "I can't do this alone." Emma led her inside, shooting me a look that said, "We'll talk later." I stood there, knife in hand, feeling like I'd just walked into the middle of a nightmare. Stacy plopped onto our couch, rambling about how her boyfriend of 2 years had dumped her out of nowhere. Emma sat next to her, holding her hand, nodding along sympathetically. I stayed in the kitchen, trying to focus on the tacos. But as Stacy's dramatic retelling went on, I couldn't help overhearing. Apparently, her boyfriend Jake had completely blindsided her, breaking up with her over text because he felt they weren't compatible. Stacy, of course, insisted that she'd been the perfect girlfriend and that Jake was just an emotionally unavailable jerk. "Do you have anywhere to stay tonight?" Emma asked her gently. Stacy sniffled, her eyes darting toward me in the kitchen before answering. I can't go home to my parents. They'll just say I told you so. And all my other friends are busy." I didn't know where else to go. I could see where this was headed, and I wasn't happy about it. Sure enough, Emma turned to me. "Would it be okay if Stacy stayed here for a few days? Just until she gets back on her feet?" What was I supposed to say? "No, your best friend can't stay here even though she's clearly a mess?" So I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, of course." At first, I tried to be patient. Stacy was heartbroken. I get it. Breakups suck. The first couple of days, I stayed out of her way, letting Emma handle her. But by the end of the week, it became clear that a few days was turning into who knows how long. Stacy wasn't just staying with us. She was taking over. The guest room, which Emma and I had carefully kept neat and organized, became a disaster zone. Clothes were everywhere. On the floor, on the bed, draped over the chair. Empty coffee cups and takeout containers piled up on the nightstand. It was like a teenager's room after a bad breakup. Except Stacy was 34. She practically lived in the living room, binge-watching reality shows at full volume and hogging the couch. Twice, I came home from work to find her sprawled out in her pajamas, eating snacks out of a family-sized chip bag while watching some dating show. She didn't even glance up when I walked in, just muttered, "Hey," between bites. The kitchen wasn't safe either. Stacy wasn't much of a cook, but that didn't stop her from using our pots and pans like she was auditioning for a cooking show. The problem was, she never cleaned up after herself. I'd wake up in the morning to find the sink overflowing with dirty dishes and random half-eaten meals left on the counter. I tried talking to Emma about it. "Look," I said one night, "I know Stacy's going through a lot, but she's treating this place like a hotel. It's not fair to us." Emma sighed, looking torn. "I know it's frustrating, but she doesn't have anywhere else to go. She just needs a little more time." "A little more time?" I repeated. "It's been 2 weeks. How much longer are we supposed to put up with this?" Emma hesitated. "I'll talk to her." But when she did, it didn't help. Stacy flipped the script, acting like she was the victim. "I'm sorry if my presence is such a burden," she said dramatically, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'll leave if that's what you want." Emma, of course, rushed to reassure her. No, it's not like that. We just want to make sure you're okay." It was infuriating. Stacy knew exactly how to manipulate Emma, and Emma fell for it every time. The final straw came about a month in. One Saturday morning, I went into the backyard to grab some tools for a DIY project I'd been working on. To my surprise, I found my power drill, saw, and several other tools scattered across the patio. Stacy was sitting on the grass with a pile of random wooden scraps, painting them bright neon colors. "What's this?" I asked, gesturing to the mess. She looked up, unbothered. "Oh, it's for my therapy. My counselor suggested doing something creative to process my emotions." I blinked at her. "You went through my tools without asking?" She shrugged. "I didn't think you'd mind." I was done. I walked back inside and found Emma in the kitchen. "She has to go," I said firmly. "I'm not asking anymore." Emma looked at me, surprised by my tone. "What happened?" "She's treating this house like her personal playground." "I'm done with it, Emma. I've been patient, but this isn't working. She needs to leave." Emma sighed, rubbing her temples. "Okay, I'll talk to her again." This time, I didn't leave it up to Emma. I sat down with both of them and laid it out. "Stacy, we've done our best to support you through this. But it's been a month. This isn't sustainable for us. You need to start looking for another place to stay. Stacy didn't take it well. She accused me of being heartless, of not understanding what she was going through. You're kicking me out when I'm at my lowest? She said, glaring at me. Wow, what a great friend you are. I didn't let her guilt trip me. I'm not kicking you out today, but you need to find somewhere else. We've given you plenty of time. Emma looked torn, but for once, she didn't side with Stacy. Within a week, Stacy was gone. She left in a huff, muttering something about how I'd always been controlling and how Emma deserved better. As she drove off, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, our house felt like ours again. But even then, I knew this wasn't the last we'd hear from Stacy. The real Stacy's damage started on a random Saturday afternoon. Emma had gone out for her usual brunch with Stacy. I wasn't exactly thrilled about it, but I'd stopped commenting on their meetups months ago. What was the point? Stacy was going to be a part of Emma's life no matter what I said. I stayed home, figuring I'd use the quiet to catch up on errands. Nothing exciting, just groceries, laundry, and a bit of yard work. By the time Emma got back, I was in the kitchen unloading the groceries. I greeted her like I always did, but something felt off. She barely said a word, just mumbled a "hey" and went straight to the bedroom. I stood there for a second, holding a bag of apples, trying to figure out if I'd done something to piss her off. Maybe she was just tired? I shrugged it off and went back to putting things away. For the rest of the day, Emma was distant. Like, really distant. She avoided eye contact, answered my questions with one-word replies, and spent most of her time glued to her phone. I asked her a couple of times if something was wrong, but she just brushed me off with, "I'm fine." Clearly, she wasn't. I figured maybe Stacy had unloaded some of her usual drama, and Emma just needed time to process. That night, though, things got weird. After dinner, she barely touched her plate and went to bed early. When I joined her later, she was curled up on the far edge of the bed, pretending to be asleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell was going on. The next morning, I decided to push the issue. "Emma, seriously, what's going on? You've been acting weird since you got back from brunch." She hesitated for a moment, not looking at me. Then she said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Okay," I said, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "What is it?" She finally turned to face me, her expression a mix of anger and hurt. "Were you with someone else yesterday?" I blinked at her, completely thrown off. "What? What are you talking about?" Her voice got sharper. "Stacy said she saw you in a parking lot. She said you were in your car, making out with some woman." For a second, I didn't even know how to respond. It was so out of left field that I almost laughed. But when I saw how serious Emma looked, the disbelief turned into frustration. "Emma, that's ridiculous. I wasn't with anyone. I was grocery shopping. She described your car," Emma snapped. "She said you were wearing your brown jacket. She even knew the parking lot, by that little strip mall near Main Street." I felt like I was in a bad dream. "Yeah, because I was at that strip mall. That's where the grocery store is. I wasn't making out with anyone. I was buying milk and bread." Emma crossed her arms, glaring at me. "Then why would Stacy say she saw you?" That question pissed me off more than anything. Not, "Are you sure she's mistaken?" Or, "Could it be a mix-up?" Nope. Just, why would she lie? Like the idea of Stacy lying was somehow impossible. "I don't know, Emma," I said, my voice rising. "Why don't you ask her?" Because I didn't do anything wrong. But she wasn't listening. "I don't know what to believe," she muttered, shaking her head. Stacy wouldn't lie about something like this. That hit me like a punch to the chest. She didn't know what to believe? After everything we'd been through, she couldn't trust me over Stacy? I stood up, pacing the room. "You've known me for 6 years. Do you really think I'd cheat on you? And in a parking lot of all places? Does that even sound like me?" Emma didn't answer. She just sat there, staring at her hands. "I need time to think," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. The next few days were hell. Emma barely spoke to me. She moved into the guest room, saying she needed space. Every time I tried to bring up the conversation, she shut me down. "I'm not ready to talk," she'd say. Or, "I need more time." Meanwhile, I was walking around in a fog of anger and disbelief. I couldn't stop thinking about Stacy. This was exactly the kind of chaos she thrived on. But what I couldn't wrap my head around was why. Why go to such extremes? Why lie about something so serious? Did she really hate me that much? At the same time, I couldn't ignore the bigger issue, Emma's reaction. The fact that she didn't even give me the benefit of the doubt said more about our marriage than Stacy's lies ever could. If she trusted Stacy's word over mine, what did that mean for us? A week later, Emma packed a bag and left. She didn't even tell me where she was going, just said she needed time to figure things out. I didn't fight her on it. At that point, I was too exhausted to argue. The next morning, I got a text from her. "I think it's best if we separate for now. I'll have my lawyer send over the paperwork. That was it. No discussion, no attempt to work things out, just a text and a lawyer. It was like our entire marriage had been swept aside because of one ridiculous story. I didn't even know how to process it. One part of me wanted to fight, to prove my innocence, to make Emma see reason. But another part of me was just done. If she was willing to throw everything away so easily, maybe I didn't want to save this marriage after all. In the weeks that followed, things got worse. Word spread about our separation, and Stacy made sure everyone knew her version of events. Mutual friends started acting weird around me, avoiding eye contact or making vague comments about working on myself. Even my own family started asking awkward questions like, is there any truth to what they're saying? It felt like I was living in a nightmare. Everywhere I turned, there was another reminder of how quickly people could turn on you. And through it all, Emma stayed silent. No calls, no texts, no attempts to reach out, just radio silence. At first, I was angry, angrier than I'd ever been in my life. But as the days turned into weeks, that anger started to fade. In its place was something colder, harder. If Emma didn't trust me enough to even have a conversation, then maybe I didn't need her in my life. I wasn't going to beg for someone who didn't believe in me. Let her have her time to think. Let her stay under Stacy's thumb. I was done fighting for a marriage, where I was always second place to her so-called best friend. If this was how it was going to end, then so be it. 2 months after Emma left, on one Thursday evening, something happened that I didn't see coming. I was minding my own business, scrolling through my phone while eating dinner, when I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It read, "Hi, this is Marissa. I know Stacy lied about you. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a moment, trying to figure out who the hell Marissa was. The name rang a faint bell. Something about a party Stacy and Emma dragged me to a couple of years ago. But why was she messaging me now? My first instinct was to ignore it, but something about the way she phrased it, "I know Stacy lied about you," made me curious. I replied, "What do you mean? What lie?" Her response came almost instantly. About the cheating. Stacy admitted she made it up. "I think you need to see the proof." The next day, I met Marissa at a small coffee shop downtown. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table near the window and fidgeting with her phone. I sat down across from her, feeling a mix of curiosity and dread. "Thanks for meeting me," she said nervously. "I wasn't sure if you'd even want to talk." "Yeah, well, here I am," I said. "What's this about Stacy lying?" She pulled out her phone and opened a text conversation. "I've been friends with Stacy for a long time, but after this, I can't keep quiet anymore. You need to know what really happened." She handed me the phone, and I started reading. The messages between her and Stacy were jaw-dropping. "Stacy, OMG, Emma finally left him. She actually believed me, LOL. Marissa, what are you talking about?" "Stacy, I told her I saw him making out with some rando in his car. You should have seen her face. Priceless." Marissa, "Wait, are you serious? Why would you do that?" Stacy, "Because he's a controlling jerk, and she's too dumb to see it." I had to help her. I kept scrolling, my hands trembling with anger. It got worse. "Stacy, it's not like their marriage was gonna last anyway. Emma's so gullible. She'll believe anything I tell her." Marissa, "This is messed up, Stacy." Stacy, "Whatever. She's better off without him, and now I don't have to hear about her perfect marriage anymore." Ugh! I couldn't read any further. I handed the phone back to Marissa. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "She really said all that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Marissa nodded, looking genuinely upset. "Yeah, she bragged about it, like it was some kind of accomplishment. I didn't believe it at first, but when she started mocking Emma for being too naive, I realized how twisted it was." I sat there, trying to process what I'd just seen. Stacy hadn't just lied. She'd actively sabotaged my marriage and made fun of Emma in the process. She'd manipulated her best friend for no other reason than sheer entitlement and spite. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked finally. "Why not earlier?" Marissa looked down at her coffee. "I don't know. I guess I was scared. Stacy can be intense, but I couldn't keep quiet anymore. It's not fair to you, and it's not fair to Emma." I took screenshots of the messages and thanked Marissa for coming forward. On the drive home, I couldn't stop replaying the conversation in my head. I wasn't just angry, I was furious. Furious at Stacy for being such a manipulative, entitled piece of work. Furious at Emma for falling for it so easily. And furious at myself for letting Stacy get away with her crap for so long. But more than that, I felt validated. For months, I'd been walking around with this cloud over my head, wondering if I could have done something differently. Now I had proof that none of this was my fault. Stacy had set me up from the start, and Emma had played right into her hands. By the time I got home, my anger had simmered down into something colder. I wasn't going to lash out or throw accusations around. No, I was going to handle this the right way. First, I forwarded the screenshots to my lawyer with a quick note. This is what really happened. Let me know how we can use it. Then I sat down and stared at my phone, debating whether to text Emma. Part of me didn't want to. What was the point? She'd already shown where her loyalty lay. But another part of me felt like she deserved to know the truth, even if it wouldn't change anything. After a few minutes, I typed out a message. We need to talk. It's important. Her reply came quicker than I expected. What do you want? I kept it short. I have proof that Stacy lied. Can we meet? You need to see this. There was a long pause before she replied. Fine. Tomorrow afternoon. Where? I suggested a park near her new apartment. She agreed, and that was that. I didn't want to win her back. I wasn't interested in that anymore. But I needed her to know the truth, if only to clear my name. Part of me wanted to just shove the screenshots in Emma's face and let her deal with it. But I knew I needed to keep my cool. The last thing I wanted was for her to think I was being dramatic or emotional about this. When Emma finally arrived, she looked hesitant, almost nervous. She was wearing her usual casual outfit, a hoodie and jeans, but she didn't have that confident air she used to carry. She spotted me and gave a small wave before walking over. What's this about? She asked, her arms crossed defensively. I didn't waste any time. I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshots Marissa had sent me, and handed it to her. Read this, I said flatly. Emma looked at me, confused, but took the phone and started scrolling. At first, her expression was neutral, but as she read, her face changed. Her eyes widened, her mouth fell open, and by the time she reached the last message, she looked pale. She handed the phone back to me with shaking hands. She lied, she whispered, almost to herself. Yeah, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She lied about everything. She made up the story about me cheating just to break us up, and apparently she thought it was hilarious. Emma sat down on the bench next to me, staring at the ground. I didn't know, she said softly. You didn't think she'd ever lie to you? I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. That's the problem, Emma. You didn't think. You didn't even stop to question it. You just believed her and threw me under the bus. She flinched at my words, but didn't say anything. Do you know how humiliating it's been? I continued. My friends, my family, hell, even my coworkers, started looking at me like I was some kind of dirtbag. All because you couldn't take 2 seconds to ask me what really happened. Tears started welling up in her eyes. I thought I was doing the right thing, she said. Stacy's been my best friend for years. I trusted her. Yeah, well, that trust just cost you your marriage, I said bluntly. Emma looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know. That's the problem, Emma, I said, my tone softening but still firm. You didn't know because you didn't even give me a chance. You trusted her more than you trusted me. And that says a lot about how you saw this relationship. We sat there in silence for a few minutes, the weight of everything hanging in the air. Finally, Emma spoke again. I'll cut her off, she said quietly. I'll never talk to her again. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, figure things out. I'll do whatever it takes. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Part of me wanted to believe her, but the truth was, the damage had already been done. She'd chosen Stacy over me without a second thought. I don't think we can fix this, I said finally. It's not just about what Stacy did. It's about how easily you believed her, how little trust you had in me. That's not something we can just work through. Emma started crying harder. I was stupid, she said between sobs. I should have talked to you. I should have trusted you. Please, just give me one more chance. I shook my head. I'm sorry, Emma, but I can't. This isn't just about forgiveness. It's about trust. And once that's gone, it's almost impossible to get back. She kept crying, and for a moment, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then I remembered all the nights I spent alone, wondering what I could have done differently. All the friends who ghosted me because they believed Stacy's lies. All the times I questioned my own worth because of how easily Emma discarded me. And just like that, my sympathy disappeared. I think it's best if we both move on, I said, standing up. I wish things could have been different, but this is where we are now. Emma didn't try to stop me. She just sat there, crying into her hands as I walked away. I didn't look back. For the first time in months, I felt like I was finally in control of my life again. Later that night, Emma sent me a long text apologizing again and begging me to reconsider. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Stacy's lie might have been the catalyst, but Emma's lack of trust was the real reason our marriage fell apart. And at this point, I wasn't interested in trying to fix something that had already been broken beyond repair. Instead, I forwarded the screenshots to a few of the mutual friends who'd ghosted me. I didn't add any commentary. I just let the texts speak for themselves. Within hours, my phone started blowing up with apologies and messages of support. "Wow, I can't believe Stacy would do that," one friend wrote. "I'm so sorry for doubting you. You didn't deserve this," another said. "Let me know if there's anything I can do." It was nice to have some validation, but I wasn't interested in rekindling those friendships. If they'd been so quick to believe the worst about me, they weren't people I wanted in my life anymore. As for Stacy, I didn't bother confronting her. What would be the point? She'd already shown who she was, and I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of knowing how much damage she'd caused. A few days after that, I started hearing things from mutual friends. Even though I'd cut most of them off, a couple still felt the need to keep me updated, probably out of guilt for siding with Stacy in the first place. One friend, Sarah, called me up and said, "You're not going to believe this, but Stacy's basically been blacklisted from our group. Apparently, once word got out about what she'd done, everyone started distancing themselves from her." Marissa had shared the screenshots with a few other people, and from there, the story spread like wildfire. Stacy tried to defend herself, saying she was just looking out for Emma and that I was controlling and toxic, but no one was buying it anymore. "She's completely spiraling," Sarah said, laughing. "She's been posting these long rants on social media about how everyone's turned against her and how she's the real victim." Curious, I checked Stacy's profiles for myself, using an incognito account, of course. Sure enough, there were multiple posts about how fake friends had abandoned her and how she'd only tried to help. One post even said, "I guess people can't handle the truth. I stood up for Emma when no one else would, and now I'm the bad guy." Pathetic. The comments weren't exactly sympathetic. Most people were calling her out, saying things like, "You didn't help anyone. You ruined a marriage." And, "This is what happens when you manipulate people." One person straight up wrote, "Maybe take a good hard look at yourself before blaming everyone else." It was satisfying to see her finally get what was coming to her. Meanwhile, Emma's life wasn't looking much better. She moved back in with her parents after everything went down, and from what I heard, things were tense. Her mom, who had always been a bit of a skeptic when it came to Stacy, was livid when she found out the truth. A mutual friend told me about a particularly heated argument Emma had with her mom. Apparently, her mom said, "You threw away a good man for a liar. How could you be so stupid?" Harsh, but honestly, she wasn't wrong. Emma was struggling to rebuild her life, but it wasn't going well. Her attempts to reconnect with some of our old friends were met with mixed reaction. While a few people were willing to forgive her, most weren't. They'd seen how easily she'd turned on me, and they didn't want to risk being in the same position. "She looks miserable," Sarah told me during one of our rare conversations. "Like she's trying to put on a brave face, but it's obvious she regrets everything." A few weeks later, Stacy lost her job. Marissa, who still worked with her, sent me a quick message. "Just thought you'd want to know. Stacy got fired today." Turns out, Stacy's reputation had started catching up with her at work. People found out about what she'd done, and her coworkers started avoiding her. She'd always been the type to stir up drama in the office, but after this, no one wanted to deal with her anymore. Eventually, her boss caught wind of the tension and let her go, citing interpersonal issues as the reason. I'd like to say I felt bad for her, but I didn't. She'd spent years manipulating people and causing chaos, and now she was finally facing the consequences. As for me, life kept getting better. One day, months after everything had gone down, I ran into Marissa at a coffee shop. We ended up chatting for a bit, and she filled me in on the latest gossip. "Emma reached out to Stacy a few weeks ago," she said, rolling her eyes. "Can you believe that?" "What happened?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Well, Emma tried to apologize, saying she wanted to move past everything," Marissa explained. "But Stacy just laughed in her face. She told Emma she was pathetic for even trying, and that she was better off without her." I shook my head, a mix of amusement and disbelief. "Figures. Stacy doesn't know how to take responsibility for anything." Marissa smirked. "Yeah, well, they're both getting what they deserve." Looking back, I can't say I'm glad everything happened the way it did, but I am grateful for where I ended up. Stacy and Emma's toxic dynamic was a ticking time bomb, and I just happened to be the collateral damage. But in the end, they destroyed each other, and I got to walk away with a clean slate. It's funny how life works sometimes. Karma doesn't always come immediately, but when it does, it hits hard. Emma and Stacy learned that the hard way, and honestly, I'm okay with that. They made their choices, and now they're living with the consequences. As for me, I'm moving forward. I've built a life that makes me happy, surrounded by people who truly care about me, and that's the best revenge I could have asked for. Story 4. This story is titled, "Parents Dumped Me for 9 years because of my sick sister." When they finally tried to reconnect, I pretended not to know them. Hey everyone, we put a lot of time and effort into finding these stories to keep bringing you the best content. If you enjoy what we do, it would mean the world if you hit that subscribe button. Your support really makes all the difference and keeps this journey going strong. Thanks so much for being here with me. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, "Hey Reddit, I don't really post personal stuff like this often, but lately I've been doing a lot of reflecting on my past. This post is probably going to be long because there's a lot to unpack. I don't really remember every detail of when it happened, but certain parts stick out in my mind, even after all these years. I was 6 years old, and my parents told me I was going to visit my grandparents. It sounded exciting at the time because I loved visiting them. Gran always had cookies waiting, and she let me watch cartoons way past when I should have been in bed. My grandpa would take me outside to pick tomatoes in the garden, even though I didn't like tomatoes. I just liked hanging out with him. So when they said I'd be staying there for a little while, I didn't think anything of it. I remember my mom was really quiet that day. Quieter than usual. She hugged me before I left, but it didn't feel like her normal hug. It was stiff, kind of forced. My dad was rushing around like he had somewhere else to be. He barely said goodbye when he dropped me off. He didn't even come inside. He just kind of waved as he drove off. At the time, I thought maybe he was just in a hurry. It's funny how little kids don't see the bigger picture. I didn't realize I'd been abandoned. Not yet. At first, I kept asking Gran when my parents were coming back. She'd smile and say, "Soon, sweetheart." I think she really believed that at first. I think we all did. But then days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Gran eventually stopped giving me answers. She just looked sad whenever I asked. Grandpa, who was usually so cheerful, started shaking his head and muttering under his breath whenever my parents came up. The real explanation came from my uncle. My uncle is my dad's younger brother, and he's always been the kind of person who tells it like it is. No sugarcoating. I was playing in the backyard when he came over one day. He sat me down on the swing set and told me, as gently as he could, that my parents weren't coming back. Not for a while, anyway. "They think it's best for you to stay here," he said. I didn't understand. Why would it be best for me to stay here? Why weren't they coming back? He tried to explain that my sister was sick and that my parents needed to focus on taking care of her. Even at 6, I knew that didn't feel right. Why couldn't they take care of both of us? Why couldn't I go back home? He didn't have answers for that, and I could tell he was mad at my parents, though he didn't say it outright. I remember crying that night. Not just crying, but sobbing. Like the kind of crying where you can't breathe. Gran sat with me on the couch and rocked me back and forth like I was a baby again. She didn't say much. She just let me cry it out. I think that's when it really hit me that they weren't coming back for me. Life with Gran and Grandpa wasn't bad, though. They were loving and kind, and they tried to give me as much stability as they could. But they were also old and tired. I think it was a lot for them to suddenly have a little kid to take care of. That's where my uncle and aunt stepped in. My uncle, who didn't have kids of his own, started coming over more often. At first, he'd just help out, fixing stuff around the house, mowing the lawn, and taking me out to get ice cream when he could tell I needed cheering up. But after a while, it became clear that my grandparents couldn't keep up with me full time. So my uncle and his wife offered to take me in. I didn't want to leave Gran and Grandpa, but they sat me down one evening and explained that it was for the best. "You'll still see us all the time," Gran promised. And she was right. They only lived a few blocks away from my uncle, so I saw them almost every day. Living with my uncle and aunt was an adjustment at first. I was used to my grandparents' slower pace, and suddenly I was in a house with younger adults who had a completely different vibe. They were stricter in some ways. Bedtimes were actually enforced, but they were also more energetic. My uncle would play catch with me in the yard, and my aunt would bake cookies with me and let me decorate them, even though I was terrible at it. I started calling them Mom and Dad when I was around 8. It just kind of happened naturally. They never asked me to. They said I could call them whatever I wanted, but after a while, it just felt right. They were the ones who tucked me in at night, helped me with my homework, and came to my school events. The whole time, my bio parents were ghosts. I'd call them sometimes, but they wouldn't pick up. I'd send letters, but they wouldn't write back. Every now and then, Gran would get an update about my sister through one of her church friends, and that was the only way I ever knew what was going on with them. One time, when I was about 8 or 9, they did visit. I don't even remember why. Maybe they felt guilty, or maybe they just wanted to check the box of seeing their son. Whatever the reason, it was awkward. They acted like they didn't know what to say to me, and I didn't know what to say to them either. I was shy around them, like they were strangers. And honestly, that's what they felt like. They didn't stay long. I think the whole visit lasted an hour, tops. After they left, my uncle hugged me and said, "You don't need to worry about them, okay? We've got you." And that's when I decided that he was my real dad. My bio parents might have brought me into the world, but they weren't the ones raising me. Looking back, that drop-off at my grandparents' house was probably the most defining moment of my childhood. It's the moment my life split in two. The life I thought I'd have with my bio parents, and the life I ended up having with my uncle and aunt. I'm grateful for them every single day. But I'd be lying if I said that abandonment didn't leave some scars. By the time I was about 9, I had stopped asking about my bio parents as much. Not because I didn't care, I mean, they were my parents, right? But because asking never led to anything. I'd bring them up, and my grandparents would just get quiet. My uncle and aunt, though they tried to stay neutral, couldn't hide their frustration either. I guess I just got tired of the same non-answers. At first, I still tried to reach out to them. I'd send letters with little updates about school, like, I got a gold star on my spelling test, or, we're learning about dinosaurs, and T-Rex is my favorite. Looking back, they were probably the kind of things a little kid would think their parents would love to hear. But they never wrote back. Not once. I'd sit by the mailbox for days after sending something, hoping maybe this time they'd reply. Eventually, I just stopped waiting. When I was around 10, I had this old flip phone my uncle gave me. It didn't have games or anything cool on it, just basic calling and texting, but I loved it because it made me feel grown up. I used to call my parents sometimes, thinking maybe they'd pick up if it was their big boy son calling. They didn't. Not once. I left voicemails sometimes, but they never called back. One time I even asked Gran if maybe they'd lost my number or forgot where we lived. She just gave me this sad little smile and said, "Sweetheart, they know how to find you if they want to." I don't know why, but that hit me hard. The idea that they could call or visit anytime they wanted but just didn't, that was a tough pill to swallow. I think what really made me stop trying was this one visit when I was around 11. It was their first visit in years, and I got so excited when I heard they were coming. I cleaned my room, brushed my hair extra nice, and even put on this stupid button-up shirt my aunt said made me look handsome. When they showed up, though, it was like they barely knew me. They acted polite, like how you might act around a coworker's kid or something, but not like parents. My mom brought me this generic toy truck, and my dad just kind of sat there awkwardly, asking questions like, "So, how's school?" It felt weird, like they were strangers. I wanted to yell at them, "I'm your son! Why don't you know me?" But I didn't. I just sat there and gave short answers until they left. After that, I told my uncle I didn't want to see them anymore. He didn't push me on it, just said, "That's your choice, buddy. We'll support you no matter what." I stopped calling them, stopped writing, and honestly, they didn't even notice. The silence between us wasn't just me cutting them off, it was mutual. By the time I was 12, I decided I was done. No more reaching out, no more waiting for them to show up. I was over it. If they wanted me in their life, they'd have to prove it. Spoiler alert, they didn't. What made it easier to let go was how much my aunt and uncle stepped up. They didn't just take care of me, they parented me. My uncle went to every parent-teacher conference, even the boring ones where the teacher just said, "He's doing fine." My aunt would stay up late with me when I had a project due the next day, even though I'd procrastinated until the last minute. One summer, they even took me to Disneyland. I didn't really think much about it at the time, but looking back, I realize how much they saved up for that trip. We weren't rich or anything, but they wanted me to have that experience. My uncle even went on Space Mountain with me, even though he hates roller coasters. That's the kind of people they are. Meanwhile, my bio parents were basically ghosts. I didn't hear from them at all after that awkward visit. Gran mentioned them once in a while, like, "Your mom asked how you were doing," but it felt so hollow. If she cared, why didn't she ask me directly? It's not like my phone number changed. The last real update I got about them was when my sister got worse. Gran told me in passing that they'd moved to be closer to a hospital that specialized in her illness. I felt bad for my sister. I really did. But I also felt this resentment bubbling up. They could uproot their whole lives for her, but they couldn't pick up the phone to check on me? I tried not to let it get to me too much. My life with my uncle and aunt was good, stable. They made sure I had everything I needed, and they were always there for me, even when I didn't realize I needed them. I still saw my grandparents all the time, and they always made me feel loved. By the time I was a teenager, I think I'd come to terms with it. My bio parents weren't really my parents anymore. Not in the way that mattered. I started seeing my uncle and aunt as my real parents. They earned that title in every way that counts. What stuck with me, though, was this underlying sense of being disposable. Like, if my parents could just leave me like that, what did that say about me? Was I not worth fighting for? I didn't talk about those feelings much, but I think my uncle and aunt sensed it. One day, out of the blue, my uncle sat me down and said, "You know you're wanted, right? You're not just here because we had to take you in. We wanted you." I didn't cry in front of him because, Teenage boys don't cry. But later that night, I did. I think that's when I stopped thinking of myself as the kid my parents left and started thinking of myself as the kid my uncle and aunt chose. It made all the difference. By the time I was 14, I had settled into my life with my uncle and aunt as my new normal. I wasn't the kid who got left behind anymore, at least not in my day-to-day life. My uncle and aunt never made me feel like a burden. If anything, they treated me like I was the best thing that ever happened to them. One day, I overheard my aunt talking to my gran about how they'd never been able to have kids. She sounded so sad, saying, "We tried everything, but it just wasn't meant to be." I had no idea before that. They never talked about it around me, probably because they didn't want me to feel like some kind of replacement. But after I overheard that conversation, it started to make sense. The way they poured everything they had into raising me wasn't just because they were good people. It was because they really, genuinely wanted to be parents. It hit me differently after that. I mean, I'd always loved them, but realizing how much they'd been through made me appreciate them even more. They weren't just filling in for my bio parents. They chose me. Around this time, we started talking about adoption. My uncle brought it up casually one night after dinner. "How would you feel if we made this official?" he asked. At first, I didn't know what to say. I mean, they already felt like my parents in every way that mattered. Would a piece of paper really change anything? But the more we talked about it, the more it started to feel like a big deal. It wasn't just about legality, it was about belonging. They explained that adopting me wasn't as simple as just signing some forms. There were legal hurdles because my bio parents still had parental rights, even though they'd essentially abandoned me. My uncle said it would be expensive and complicated, but they were willing to go through it if it's what I wanted. I told them I'd think about it, and I did. A lot. I even talked to Gran about it, and she said something that stuck with me. "You already know where your heart belongs, sweetheart. This is just catching the rest of the world up." After a few months, I told my uncle and aunt I wanted to move forward with the adoption. That decision kicked off a long, frustrating process. Lawyers, court dates, paperwork. It felt like it would never end. My bio parents didn't contest it, of course. Why would they? It wasn't like they were fighting to keep me. But the system still made it harder than it needed to be. Even with all the hoops we had to jump through, my uncle and aunt were determined to make it happen. I think they wanted it as much as I did, maybe even more. They wanted me to know, without a doubt, that I was theirs. The adoption finally became official when I turned 18. I remember sitting in the courtroom, hearing the judge declare that my uncle and aunt were now my legal parents. It felt surreal. I'd been waiting for that moment for so long, and when it finally happened, I didn't even know how to react. My uncle hugged me afterward, and I could tell he was holding back tears. "We've always been your family," he said. "This just makes it official." That night, we celebrated with dinner at my favorite pizza place. It wasn't a fancy celebration, but it felt perfect. My aunt kept calling me her miracle kid, and my uncle said, "You were just misrouted by the stork at first, but we found you." Looking back, that moment stands out as one of the happiest days of my life. Not because the adoption changed how we felt about each other, it didn't, but because it erased any lingering doubt I had about where I belonged. The adoption also changed how I thought about my bio parents. For years, I'd been carrying this weight of not being wanted. But that day, it finally hit me that their rejection didn't define me. My uncle and aunt's love did. I started calling them mom and dad full time after that. It wasn't something we discussed or decided, it just happened naturally. They didn't say anything about it the first time I did, but I saw the way my aunt's face lit up when I said, "Thanks, Mom," as she handed me a plate of food. The adoption also marked the beginning of me fully letting go of my bio parents. Before that, I think a small part of me was still holding out hope that they'd come back, that they'd apologize, that they'd somehow make up for all the years they'd been gone. But after the adoption, I realized I didn't need that anymore. I already had everything I needed. Around this time, I started college. My new parents, it still feels weird calling them that even now, were my biggest cheerleaders. They helped me fill out my FAFSA, drove me to campus tours, and even bought me a new laptop as a graduation gift. When I moved into my dorm, my aunt cried, and my uncle pretended not to. College was a fresh start in a lot of ways. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who didn't know anything about my past. I didn't have to explain why I didn't talk to my bio parents, or why I called my uncle and aunt mom and dad. I could just be me. Of course, I still went home for holidays and long weekends. Every time I walked through the door, my mom, my aunt, but now officially mom, would have cookies waiting, and my dad, my uncle, would ask me about every single detail of my classes. They made sure I knew that no matter where I went or what I did, I always had a place with them. In a weird way, I think being adopted at 18 meant more to me than if it had happened when I was younger. By then, I fully understood what it meant. It wasn't just about being taken in, it was about being chosen. My uncle and aunt didn't just take care of me out of obligation, they went out of their way to make me part of their family. That's something my bio parents never did. I was 20 when my sister passed away. It was late November, right after Thanksgiving. I hadn't seen or spoken to her in years, so hearing the news hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. I didn't cry, but it was like a weight settled in my chest that I couldn't shake. Gran was the one who told me. She called one evening and said, "Sweetheart, I need to tell you something. Your sister passed away last night." Her voice was steady, but I could tell she was holding back tears. Gran had always stayed in touch with my bio parents more than I did, mostly because of her church circle. She'd hear updates about my sister through mutual friends, and sometimes she'd pass them on to me, but I never asked for details. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to grieve for her because she was my sister, but the truth is, I barely knew her. She was 14 when I was sent away, and by the time I was old enough to really remember her, I'd already been out of the picture for years. The memories I did have were faint, like flashes of moments we shared as kids. Playing tag in the yard, her braiding my hair for fun, even though I hated it, and her yelling at me for breaking her favorite doll. Those were the memories I clung to when I thought about her. But the reality was, she grew up without me, and I grew up without her. Gran told me the funeral would be in 2 weeks. She wasn't pushy, but I could tell she thought I should go. "It might give you some closure," she said softly. I told her I'd think about it. The next week, I wrestled with the decision. I didn't want to see my bio parents, but I also felt like not going would be wrong. My sister didn't deserve to be ignored just because I had problems with them. In the end, I decided to go, but I made it clear to my parents, through Gran, that I didn't want to talk to them. I showed up at the funeral late and slipped into the back row of the church. It was a small service, mostly family, and a few of my sister's friends. My bio parents were in the front, and even from the back, I could see how broken they looked. My mom kept dabbing at her face with a tissue, and my dad just stared straight ahead like he was in a daze. I didn't feel anything when I looked at them. No anger, no sadness, nothing. They were just two people I used to know. The service itself was short and quiet. The pastor talked about my sister's life, her strength, and how much she meant to the people who loved her. I sat there, feeling out of place. I didn't belong in that room, surrounded by people who knew her so much better than I did. When the service ended, I slipped out before anyone could stop me. I didn't want to get cornered by my parents or have some awkward conversation with relatives I hadn't seen in years. I just walked to my car and drove away. And drove. I thought that would be the end of it, but of course it wasn't. A few days later, my bio parents called my uncle. I guess they wanted to talk to me, but I told him to tell them I wasn't available. I didn't care what they had to say. They'd ignored me for years, and now they suddenly wanted to reconnect? It felt too convenient. Gran wasn't thrilled with my decision. She thought I should at least hear them out, but she didn't push me. She's always respected my boundaries when it comes to them. In the days that followed, I felt this weird mix of emotions. I wasn't sad for my parents. I couldn't be, after everything. But I did feel a sense of loss for the relationship I could have had with my sister. She was the one person who might have understood what I went through, and now she was gone. My uncle and aunt were amazing during this time, as they always are. My mom, my aunt, but she's mom to me now, kept checking on me, asking how I was feeling. My dad, my uncle, didn't say much, but he gave me these reassuring pats on the back whenever he saw me. They knew I wasn't grieving in the traditional sense, but they also knew this wasn't easy for me. What surprised me most was how much I thought about my sister after the funeral. I found myself digging through old photo albums, looking for pictures of us as kids. There weren't many, just a handful of us playing in the backyard or sitting together on Christmas morning. But those few pictures felt precious, like proof that we'd once been a real family, even if it was only for a little while. I also thought a lot about the life she must have had. Gran had told me bits and pieces over the years. My sister was strong, kind, and loved by everyone who knew her. She fought her illness with everything she had, and I respected her for that. But I also couldn't help but wonder if she ever missed me. Did she think about the little brother who got sent away? Did she feel guilty, even though none of it was her fault? I'll never know, and that's the hardest part. In the weeks after the funeral, my bio parents tried to reach out again. They sent a card through Gran, saying they wanted to talk. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready, if I'd ever be ready. The funeral didn't bring me closure, at least not the way Gran had hoped. If anything, it just brought up more questions. But it also solidified something for me. My parents and I were strangers now. They might have given me life, but they weren't my family. My family was the people who stood by me, who raised me, who loved me without conditions. Christmas was always a big deal for my family. Not my bio parents, of course. I'm talking about my uncle, aunt, gran, and grandpa. Ever since I started living with my uncle and aunt, they made Christmas special for me. Decorating the tree, baking cookies, blasting Christmas music. It was like something out of a holiday movie. For years, that was my Christmas tradition, and I loved it. This past Christmas felt a little different, though. It was the first one after my sister's funeral, and while I hadn't been close to her, the absence of her presence in the background of my life felt strange. My bio parents had tried to reach out to me a few times since the funeral, but I'd ignored every attempt. I figured they'd get the hint eventually. That night, I went to midnight mass with Gran, which was something we always did together. My aunt and uncle didn't usually come. They weren't really church people, but Gran loved the tradition, and I liked spending that time with her. It was one of those quiet moments where everything feels peaceful, and for a while it felt like the weight of everything that had happened was lifted off my shoulders. That peace didn't last long. About halfway through the service, I felt someone sit down behind us. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I caught a whiff of my mom's perfume. It's funny how smells can trigger memories. For a second, I was a little kid again, sitting on her lap while she read me a story. But that memory was quickly replaced by anger. What were they doing here? I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see them, and I definitely didn't want to talk to them. I focused on the service, but I could feel their presence behind me the entire time. It was like they were trying to bore holes into the back of my head with their stares. When the service ended, I stood up to leave with Gran, but before I could take 2 steps, my mom was in front of me. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly, like we were picking up a conversation we'd had yesterday. I froze. For a second, I didn't know what to do. Then, without thinking, I said, "Sorry, do I know you?" Her face fell. I could see the shock and hurt in her eyes, but I didn't care. I was done pretending everything was okay. My dad stepped forward and said, "We're your parents." I shook my head. "My parents are at home," I said. Then I turned to Gran. "Are you ready to go?" Gran didn't say anything, but she gave me a little nod, and we started walking toward the door. My bio parents followed us, calling after me. "You really don't recognize us?" my mom asked. I stopped and turned around. "Oh, are you my dad's brother? I think I remember you from when I was little," I said, pretending to be confused. That was the final straw. My dad's face turned red, and my mom looked like she was about to cry. I felt a twinge of guilt, but it wasn't enough to make me stop. They had years to make this right, and they hadn't. Gran didn't say much on the way home. She just held my hand and squeezed it every now and then. I think she was proud of me for standing my ground, but she also knew how heavy the moment was for me. When we got back to the house, my aunt and uncle were waiting up for us. I told them what happened, and my uncle just shook his head. "They don't get to play the victim now," he said. "Not after everything." I went to bed that night feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me felt triumphant, like I'd finally stood up for myself in a way I never had before. But another part of me felt hollow, like maybe I'd crossed a line. A few days later, a letter arrived. It was from my bio parents. My aunt handed it to me with a look that said, "You don't have to read this if you don't want to." But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. The letter was long and emotional. They talked about how hurt they were by my reaction, how they'd only ever tried to do what was best for me, and how they'd always be my parents no matter what. They asked for forgiveness, saying they wanted to start fresh now that my sister was gone. I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. My family was divided on what I should do. Gran thought I was justified in how I handled it. "They made their choice a long time ago," she said. "Now they have to live with it." Some other relatives, though, thought I was being too harsh. "They're grieving," one cousin said. "Maybe this is their way of trying to make amends." But to me, it felt like too little, too late. Where were they when I was 8 and scared and confused? Where were they at my school plays, my birthdays, my graduation? They had their chance, and they blew it. The thing is, I don't hate them. I don't think I ever could. But I also don't feel like I owe them anything. They made their choice, and I made mine. For now, I'm focusing on the family that's always been there for me. My aunt and uncle, who raised me when my parents wouldn't, and Gran, who never stopped loving me. They're the ones who matter. After Christmas, things went back to normal, or as normal as they could be. I returned to school, buried myself in studying, and tried to push the awkward encounter at midnight mass out of my head. But my bio parents weren't done. About a week into January, another letter arrived. This one wasn't just emotional, it was almost desperate. My aunt handed it to me like she was holding a bomb, her eyes full of concern. "You don't have to read this," she said gently. But I did. I felt like I had to, even if it was just to see what they had to say. The letter was long, several pages, handwritten in my mom's neat script. She apologized, over and over, for what they'd done. She explained that they'd been overwhelmed when my sister got sick and had made decisions they thought were best for everyone, even if those decisions hurt me. She said they'd never meant to abandon me, but they didn't know how to juggle everything at the time. It sounded like excuses to me. They didn't know how to juggle everything? Plenty of families deal with tough situations without throwing one of their kids away like an old toy. The letter went on to talk about my sister's final years, how hard she'd fought, how much she missed me, and how she'd always hoped we could reconnect someday. That part stung. I'd spent so much time being angry at my parents that I never really thought about how my absence might have affected her. But then the tone shifted. My mom started talking about how, now that my sister was gone, they wanted to rebuild our family. She wrote that they loved me and missed me and hoped I'd give them a chance to make things right. The last line hit me the hardest. No matter what you say or do, you'll always be our son. I put the letter down and stared at it for a long time. Part of me felt like they were trying to manipulate me, using my sister's memory to guilt me into forgiving them. But another part of me wondered if they really meant it. I didn't know what to do. I showed the letter to my uncle and aunt, who read it together in silence. When they finished, my uncle said, "It's your call, kiddo. But whatever you decide, we're here for you." Gran had a different take. They made their bed, and now they want to unmake it because it's uncomfortable, she said. Don't let them guilt you into anything you're not ready for. The thing was, I wasn't sure what I was ready for. On one hand, I didn't think I could ever forgive them for what they'd done. On the other hand, cutting them off completely hadn't made the hurt go away. For weeks, I carried that letter around with me, rereading it whenever I had a spare moment. I tried to imagine what it would look like to have a relationship with them again. Would it be awkward and forced? Or could we actually rebuild something meaningful? Eventually, I wrote them a response. It wasn't long, just a couple of paragraphs. I told them I appreciated their apology but wasn't ready to forgive them. I said I needed more time to process everything, and that I'd reach out if and when I was ready to talk. I didn't tell them I loved them. I didn't call them mom or dad. I just signed it with my name. When I sent the letter, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief because I'd finally said what I needed to say. Sadness because I knew it wasn't the happy ending they were hoping for. A few weeks later, my mom wrote back. Her letter was shorter this time, but the tone was different. It felt less desperate, more understanding. She said she respected my decision and would wait as long as it took for me to be ready. She didn't push or guilt trip me. She just said she loved me and wanted me to be happy, no matter what that looked like. I haven't responded yet. Maybe I will someday, but for now, I'm focusing on the people who've always been there for me. My aunt and uncle, my real mom and dad, have done more for me than my bio parents ever did. They gave me a home, a family, and a sense of belonging. That's something my bio parents can't take away, no matter how much they try to reconnect. Gran says I handled the situation with more grace than she would have. You're a better person than me, sweetheart, she said with a little laugh. I would have told them where to stick it. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am too soft. But I like to think that setting boundaries while leaving the door open just a crack isn't weakness. It's me taking control of the situation on my own terms. For now, I'm at peace with where things stand. My bio parents might always be a part of my story, but they're not the whole story. The family that raised me, loved me, and chose me, that's my real family. And that's all I need. Story 5. Parents didn't even notice I moved out. Now dad's threatening to cut college funds, but I graduated 3 years ago. So, I'm the youngest of 5, and when I say youngest, I don't mean just by a little bit. There's like a 7-year gap between me and my next sibling. And to be honest, it always felt like I was invisible growing up. My siblings all had their own stuff going on, and I guess my parents just assumed that because I wasn't sick or having mental health issues like the rest of them, I didn't need them. I'm not trying to be all woe is me or whatever, but it's the truth. The others were always in and out of hospitals, therapy, you name it. And me? I was just there. The glass child, they call it, right? You can see me, but you don't really notice me. I was fine with that for the most part. I spent a lot of time by myself, playing video games, reading, keeping to myself. I had to learn to entertain myself because, well, no one else was really around to do it. It's not like I was expected to take care of my siblings, though. I've seen other people talk about how they had to sacrifice their childhoods to take care of brothers or sisters, but that wasn't me. My parents handled all that, so credit where credit's due. But because I wasn't causing problems, because I wasn't in crisis mode like my siblings, I just kind of fell through the cracks. I didn't need help, so I didn't get any. I don't think my parents did it on purpose or anything. It's just that when you've got four kids who are constantly dealing with health stuff, the one who's healthy is kind of like an afterthought. They were always so busy with hospital visits, doctor's appointments, and school meetings for the others that I just became this kid who didn't cause trouble and didn't get attention. It's like I was invisible, but not in the tragic movie kind of way, just in a practical, we've got our hands full kind of way. Anyway, I wasn't completely alone. When I was about 9, I made two friends, Mia and Clara, who were basically in the same boat. Their families weren't great either, and we kind of found each other in this unspoken way. We just clicked, you know? We understood what it was like to be ignored, to be left out, and that bonded us. Over time, they became more like my real family than my actual family ever did. We were inseparable all through school, and we stuck together even after high school ended. We went to college together, graduated together, and eventually moved to a new state together. It was like we built our own little family out of the scraps of what our real families couldn't give us. As for my parents, we didn't talk much once I left home. I guess that was to be expected, since we never really talked when I was still living there either. My mom would text me now and then, mostly small talk stuff like, "How's school?" or "What are you doing for work?" That kind of thing. Our relationship was super surface level, but honestly, that was an improvement from my teenage years. Back in high school, we barely spoke at all. So yeah, I didn't expect much from them, and I didn't ask for much either. I think what really made it clear how disconnected I was from them was this one phone call from my mom last year. It was a few days before Thanksgiving, and she called me out of nowhere. Now we never call each other, so right off the bat, I knew something was up. The last time I had spoken to her on the phone was like maybe a year before that, when she told me about the time and place of one of my sister's funerals. That's how little we talked. So anyway, she calls me and asks what time I'm coming for Thanksgiving. And I'm sitting there like, wait, what? Because I had no idea they were even planning anything for Thanksgiving. It wasn't like we had some big family tradition or whatever. In fact, in my whole life, I can remember maybe 3 times that they even tried to do Thanksgiving or Christmas. It just wasn't a thing in my family. I told her that I already had plans. I mean, I was going on a ski trip with Mia and Clara. So it wasn't like I could just drop everything and come over, even if I wanted to. Plus, I live 2 states away, and I would have needed to book a plane ticket months ago if I was going to come. But she acted like I was just being difficult. And then she starts guilt-tripping me, saying she was going to be all alone because my dad was going to spend the day visiting my brother in the facility he's in. He's like a 2-hour drive from them, so apparently my dad was going to be gone most of the day. I get it, I really do. But she gave me 3 days' notice. 3 days. And I was supposed to just magically show up and make her feel better? I told her I couldn't come, and she got mad, saying I didn't care about the family or some crap like that. I repeated that I already had plans, and she hung up on me. After the call, I sat there for a bit, feeling guilty but also kind of pissed. Like, I hadn't heard from them in forever, and now all of a sudden I'm the bad guy for not coming home for Thanksgiving? I scrolled through our old texts just to make sure I hadn't missed anything, but nope. Nothing about Thanksgiving, nothing about wanting to see me. She just sprung it on me last minute like I was supposed to drop everything and be there. I ended up sending her a text later that night, saying that I had a ski trip booked for Christmas and wouldn't be able to come for that either, but I'd love to catch up with her and Dad after the new year, trying to be nice about it. She didn't reply. A few days after that whole Thanksgiving mess, I was still trying to shake off the weird feeling. You know when something just nags at you and you can't quite figure out why? That's how I felt about the way my mom had tried to make me feel bad for not coming home. Like, she calls me out of nowhere, guilt trips me for not being there, but at the same time, she never actually told me they were doing Thanksgiving. It's like they expected me to be a mind reader or something. But anyway, I had pretty much moved on by then. I was getting ready for my ski trip with Mia and Clara. We'd been planning it for months, and I was super excited. The three of us hadn't had a proper vacation in forever, so we were looking forward to just hanging out and relaxing. Then out of nowhere, I get this text from my dad. Now, my dad almost never texts me, so I figured it was going to be important. But instead of something reasonable, he hits me with, "If you don't come home for Christmas, I'm stopping your college payments." At first, I actually laughed. Like what? I graduated 3 years ago. What payments? It was so out of left field I had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't missing something. I thought maybe he was confused or he was talking about someone else, so I sent him a text back, reminding him that I had already graduated. And if he thought he was still paying for my college, then he needed to check his bank account because someone was scamming him. I thought that would be the end of it. Honestly, I figured he'd feel stupid once he realized I wasn't in school anymore. But no. A few hours later, I get another text from him, this time saying that I was being selfish and ungrateful. He threw in a bunch of stuff about how they'd sacrificed so much for me and my siblings, and how I didn't appreciate any of it. Okay, first of all, I never asked for anything from them. Second, I didn't even know they were paying for my college because my grandma was the one who covered it. She told me straight up that she didn't want my parents messing with my education, so she took care of everything herself. So, yeah, I had no idea what my dad was even talking about. At this point, I'm kind of mad. Like, I get it if they're stressed out with my siblings and all, but guilt tripping me about stuff they didn't even do? That's a whole new level. So, I texted back, being as polite as I could manage, and said something like, I'm sorry you feel that way, but Grandma paid for my college. I'm happy to catch up after the holidays, but I already have plans. I thought that would shut it down, but nope. My dad decides to go full drama mode and starts texting me about how I've abandoned the family, how I'm turning my back on them, and that he's done helping me out if I won't make an effort. By this point, I'm just staring at my phone like, what is happening? Abandon the family? I've been living on my own for years and they barely even noticed. And now, all of a sudden, because I won't drop my life and rush back for Christmas, I'm the bad guy? I wanted to just ignore it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The more I thought, the more pissed off I got. It's like they hadn't spoken to me in months, hadn't bothered to check in or ask how I was doing, but the second they needed something, it was my responsibility to make everything better. I was supposed to be their backup plan or something. So I called Mia and Clara to vent. They both said the same thing, that it sounded like my parents were just using me as a guilt trip. Mia said that they probably wanted me back home for Christmas so they wouldn't feel bad about themselves, not because they actually wanted to see me. Clara, as usual, didn't hold back and said straight up, screw them, you don't owe them anything. I decided to sleep on it and cool off before responding again. But as I'm lying there, my phone buzzes again. It's my dad, but this time the text is short and cold. He says, if you don't come home, don't bother coming back at all. I read that and honestly, I just felt numb. Like, how did we get here? How did we go from not talking for months to basically disowning me because I wasn't coming for Christmas? It didn't even feel real. I stared at the message for a long time, and part of me wanted to fire back and say something nasty. I wanted to call them out on all the times they ignored me, on all the times I felt like I didn't even exist in that house. But instead, I just didn't respond. I put my phone down, rolled over, and tried to sleep. I didn't want to get dragged into some big family drama right before the holidays. I didn't want to deal with the guilt trips, the accusations, or whatever other crap they were going to throw at me. So I just left it. The next day, I woke up to more texts, this time from my mom. She didn't say much, just that they were disappointed in me, that they didn't understand why I was being so distant, and that they hoped I'd change my mind. I couldn't help but laugh a little because distant didn't even begin to cover it. I'd been distant my whole life, but they were just now noticing? I ignored the texts again and focused on getting ready for the ski trip. Mia and Clara were pumped, and honestly, I was too. It felt like the perfect escape from all the family nonsense. We hit the road the next day, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't think about my parents. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I just felt free. But of course, things couldn't stay peaceful forever. Just when I thought I could move past it, I got another message from my mom, this time right in the middle of the trip. She wasn't giving up. She said that if I didn't come home soon, they'd have to start making decisions about the future without me, decisions that I wouldn't like. That's when it clicked. They were planning something bigger than just Christmas. Maybe they were talking about one of my brothers or something with the house. I didn't know what, but suddenly it made sense why they were pushing so hard. They didn't want me around just for the holidays. They wanted me back in the fold for some bigger reason. And honestly, that realization was like a punch in the gut. All this time, I thought they were just being clingy or feeling lonely. But it was never about me. Not really. It was about what they could get from me. I was done. So, after that whole mess with my parents trying to guilt trip me, I thought things would just die down. I ignored their texts, went on the ski trip, and tried to focus on the fact that I had my own life, my own plans, and I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their world of guilt and expectations. But of course, it wasn't that simple. I was back home, just getting settled into my usual routine, when I got a message from my older brother, Jake. Now I hadn't talked to Jake in months, probably longer, actually. Jake was the one sibling who, when we were growing up, I thought would maybe understand me a little. He wasn't as sick as my other brothers, so I always figured we could have had something more, but he was always too wrapped up in his own life. Whatever. Anyway, seeing his name pop up on my phone surprised me. His message was simple. Hey, we need to talk. I didn't know what he wanted, but I wasn't in the mood for more family drama. I texted back, "About what?" A few minutes later, he calls me. I debated whether to answer, but curiosity got the better of me. So I pick up the phone, and before I can even say hello, he jumps straight into it. "Mom and Dad have been talking about making you the legal guardian for one of the boys when they're gone." I swear, I almost dropped the phone. My heart was racing, and I just sat there stunned for a few seconds. Was this some kind of joke? Like, after all these years of barely being in my life, now they're just going to dump this responsibility on me? "What the hell are you talking about?" I finally managed to ask. Jake sighs like I'm the one being unreasonable. "You know how things are with Mom and Dad. They've got a lot on their plate with the other boys, and they're not going to be around forever. They need to know someone's going to step up and take care of things when they're gone." I could feel my blood boiling. And they think that someone is me? After everything? After all the ignoring and guilt tripping, they just assume I'm going to drop everything and take over their mess? Jake didn't seem to get why I was so upset. "Look, I know it's a lot, but you're the only one who's really stable. The rest of us, we've got our own issues." I almost laughed. "Yeah, well, maybe you guys should have thought about that before now. I didn't even know this was a thing. They never told me." "They were going to talk to you about it," he said, "but I figured you should know before they tried to spring it on you." I was pissed. This wasn't just about Christmas or Thanksgiving anymore. This was bigger. They were planning something long-term, and they hadn't even thought to talk to me until now, when it was convenient for them. They hadn't spoken to me in years, and now they wanted me to step in as the responsible one? No, just no. "So what, they've been discussing this behind my back?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around it. "Like, they just decided I'd take on the responsibility without even asking me?" "Yeah, pretty much," Jake admitted. "They've been planning for a while." I sat there in silence for a minute, just staring at the wall, trying to process everything. Part of me wanted to scream at Jake, but I knew it wasn't really his fault. He was just the messenger. But that didn't change the fact that my parents were about to screw me over in the biggest way possible. They weren't just asking for a favor. They were asking me to dedicate the rest of my life to cleaning up after them. I was done being invisible, but I sure as hell wasn't going to become their backup plan now. "So what am I supposed to do?" I asked, feeling more defeated than anything. "Just drop my whole life and move back home? Give up everything I've worked for?" Jake didn't have an answer for that. He tried to talk about how hard things were for our parents, how they were struggling to manage everything with my brother's care, but I didn't care. I'd spent my whole life being pushed aside because I wasn't a problem. Now, they wanted to use me because I was the only one who had my life together? It wasn't fair. "I'm not doing it," I said, cutting him off mid-sentence. "I'm not going to be their backup. They didn't give a crap about me for the last 25 years, and they sure as hell don't get to make me responsible for everyone now." Jake was silent for a second, then said, "I get it, I do. But you're still part of the family." Family? That word made me want to scream. Sure, I was part of the family, but only when it was convenient for them. Only when they needed something. When I was a kid, they didn't care if I was okay or if I needed help. But now that they were scared of what the future held, suddenly I was the one they needed. "Tell them I'm not interested," I said, "and don't bother calling me about this again." I hung up before Jake could respond, and for a while, I just sat there, staring at the phone, trying to calm down. I felt like my whole life had been leading up to this moment where I'd finally had enough. Enough of the guilt trips, enough of the manipulative texts, enough of being ignored and then used. I wasn't going to be their safety net. A few days passed without any contact from Jake or my parents. It was almost like they were waiting for me to come to my senses, to change my mind and be the good daughter they'd suddenly decided I should be. But I wasn't about to budge. I wasn't going to let them dump their problems on me just because I was the only one left standing. Then, a letter came in the mail. It was from my mom. She hadn't even called. She just sent a letter like we were living in the 1800s or something. The letter was long and rambling, filled with the same guilt-tripping crap I'd heard before. She went on about how much they needed me, how hard things were for them, and how they didn't know what they were going to do if I didn't help. But what really pissed me off was the last part. My mom wrote, "We're not asking for much, Olivia. We just need to know that when we're gone, someone will step up for the family." That's when I realized what this was really about. They didn't care about me. They just cared about making sure their mess was cleaned up after they were gone. They didn't want me back in their lives because they missed me or loved me. They wanted me because I was convenient, because I was the only one who hadn't fallen apart. I crumpled up the letter and threw it in the trash. I was done. Update 1. After that letter from my mom, I thought I had reached my limit. I mean, what else could they throw at me that I hadn't already seen? I was already done with their guilt trips, their manipulations. They're trying to make me responsible for their mess. But of course, I was wrong. It wasn't over. Not even close. A week or two after I trashed the letter, I got another call. This time from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up, but something in me was curious. Maybe it was Jake again, or maybe it was one of my parents trying a different number since I'd been ignoring theirs. Either way, I picked up. Hey, Olivia, it's Sarah. Now, Sarah is one of my sisters. We were never really close. I mean, she was always dealing with her own stuff, hospitals, therapists, all of it. I felt bad for her growing up, sure, but I didn't really know her. We were basically strangers living under the same roof. So, hearing from her now, after everything, felt weird. Hey, I said, not sure where this was going. Look, she started. I know things have been kind of rough between you and Mom and Dad, but I really need you to listen to what I'm going to say. I could already feel my stomach sinking. Here it comes, I thought. More guilt. More trying to drag me back in. What is it? I asked, trying to sound neutral, but already bracing myself for whatever crap was coming. She took a deep breath, and then she said, They're not doing well. Like, really not doing well. Dad's health is going downhill fast, and they're freaking out because no one's stepping up to help with the boys. They're scared, Olivia. They don't know what to do. I didn't say anything for a second. It wasn't that I didn't care. I did. I didn't want to see anyone suffer, not even my parents. But after everything, after years of them not giving a crap about me, I couldn't just rush in and fix things for them. I wasn't their Band-Aid. I'm sorry to hear that, I said carefully. But I can't just drop everything. I have a life too, Sarah. She sighed, and I could tell she was frustrated. I get that, but you're the only one who's in a position to help. Jake's barely holding it together, and you know what's going on with me and the others. There's no one else, Olivia. They're desperate. Desperate because they ignored this for years, I shot back, feeling the anger bubble up again. They let this all build up, thinking it would just go away. And now, because I'm the one who managed to get out and make something of my life, it's my responsibility? That's not fair, Sarah. I know it's not fair, she said quietly, but this is where we are. They need help. And there it was again. The same old story. The same old guilt. No matter what I did, no matter how far I tried to move away from it, they always found a way to drag me back. I could feel the pressure building inside me, the frustration and resentment that had been simmering for years now coming to a boil. I'm not doing it, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I'm not going to be the one to clean up their mess. They didn't care about me when I was a kid, and they sure as hell don't get to come to me now just because it's convenient. I've got my own life. They need to figure this out themselves. I could hear the hurt in Sarah's voice when she spoke again. I get it, Olivia, I really do. But this isn't about you or me. It's about the family. It's about what's going to happen to the boys when they're gone. If we don't step up, who will? That hit me hard. Not because I suddenly felt responsible, but because it made me realize just how trapped we all were. My parents had spent years neglecting me, pushing me to the side, and now they were trying to use me as their escape plan. And my siblings? They were stuck in the middle of it all, just as trapped as I was, only they didn't have the strength to fight back. I'm sorry, I said again, softer this time, but I can't. I won't. There was a long pause, and I could feel the weight of her disappointment through the phone. But I wasn't going to cave. Not this time. I couldn't. Okay, she said finally, her voice flat. I'll tell them. She hung up before I could say anything else, and I just sat there for a while staring at my phone, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. I didn't owe my parents anything, I knew that, but still it hurt. It hurt to know that my family was falling apart, and I was powerless to stop it. Or maybe I wasn't powerless, I just wasn't willing to sacrifice myself for them anymore. A few days later, I got another letter from my mom. This time, it was even worse. She didn't even bother with pleasantries. She went straight for the guilt trip. She wrote about how disappointed she was in me, how I was letting the family down, how she couldn't believe I would turn my back on them in their time of need. She threw in a bunch of stuff about how hard it was for her and my dad, how they'd sacrificed so much for us, and how she didn't know what she'd done to deserve a daughter who was so selfish. It was brutal, and for a second it worked. I felt that old, familiar sting of guilt, the same guilt I'd felt my whole life growing up. But then I remembered all the years I'd spent being invisible, all the times they'd forgotten about me, all the moments I needed them, and they weren't there. and I realized that this wasn't about them needing help. This was about control. This was about them trying to pull me back into their web, to make me feel like I owed them something. But I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. I crumpled up the letter and tossed it in the trash, just like the last one. I was done. I was done being their pawn. I was done letting them manipulate me. I had my own life now, and I wasn't going to let them take that away from me. The next day, I blocked their numbers. I blocked Jake's too, just to be safe. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the only one that felt right. I couldn't keep letting them drag me down, keep making me feel like I was responsible for their problems. They made their choices, and now they had to live with them. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Update 2. Blocking their numbers felt like a relief, like this heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in, well, ever, I had control over the situation. I wasn't sitting there waiting for another guilt-tripping message from my mom or a surprise call from Jake. It was quiet, peaceful, but of course that didn't last. About 2 weeks after I blocked them, I got a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and honestly I thought it might be a delivery or something. But when I opened the door, there she was, my mom, standing right there on my doorstep like she had every right to be there. I don't know how she found me. I mean, I hadn't exactly been hiding, but I didn't think she'd just show up at my place. She looked different. Older, I guess. Or maybe it was just the stress, but either way, I could see that things hadn't been easy for her. But I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm as I could. She didn't answer right away. She just stood there looking at me like she didn't recognize me. Finally, she spoke. "We need to talk, Olivia." I sighed. "No, we really don't. I've said everything I needed to say. I've made my decision." She stepped forward like she was going to come in, but I stood in the doorway, blocking her. I wasn't about to let her in and let this turn into another guilt trip. "Please, just listen," she said, her voice softer now. "Your father's getting worse. He's in and out of the hospital, and we don't know how much time he has left. I I don't know what to do, Olivia." There it was. The card she'd been waiting to play. The "your father is dying" card. She didn't say it outright, but I knew that's what she was hinting at. And I'm not heartless. I didn't want my dad to suffer. But after everything they'd put me through, I couldn't just drop everything and rush to their side. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But this isn't my problem. You and Dad have had years to figure this out. You can't just show up now and expect me to fix everything." She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just need you to be there. For the family." "For the family?" I repeated, almost laughing. "What family? The one that ignored me for 25 years? The one that only talks to me when they need something? That's not a family, Mom. That's just manipulation." Her eyes widened, and for a second, I thought maybe she was going to argue with me. But instead, she just started crying. Right there, on my doorstep, she broke down in tears. And I didn't know what to do. I wasn't going to invite her in, but I couldn't just stand there and watch her cry either. "Look," I said, my voice softer now. "I get that this is hard for you. I really do. But I'm not your backup plan. I'm not the person who's going to come in and make everything okay. You made your choices. Now you have to deal with them." She wiped her eyes and looked up at me, and I could see the anger starting to replace the sadness. "We did the best we could, Olivia. You don't understand what it was like, raising all of you, dealing with everything. We didn't have time for you because we were trying to keep everyone else alive." There it was. The excuse. The same excuse I'd heard a million times before. "And that's not my fault," I said, my voice firm now. "You made the choice to have 5 kids. You made the choice to focus on everyone else and leave me behind. That was your decision, not mine. And now you're trying to make me feel guilty for it. I won't do it, Mom. I won't." She stood there for a long time, not saying anything, just staring at me like she didn't know who I was anymore. And maybe she didn't. Maybe in her mind I was still that little kid she could ignore because I wasn't causing trouble. But I wasn't that kid anymore. I was done being invisible. Finally, she spoke. "So, that's it. You're just going to turn your back on us?" I shook my head. "No, you turned your back on me a long time ago. I'm just finally walking away." She didn't have anything to say to that. She just turned and walked away, heading back to her car. I watched her go, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was sad, sure, but most of me just felt free. Like I'd finally let go of something I'd been carrying for years. Something I should have let go of a long time ago. After she left, I went back inside and sat down, trying to process everything that had just happened. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just done. Done with the guilt, the manipulation, the constant feeling like I wasn't enough. I wasn't going to be their backup plan. I wasn't going to be their last resort. I had my own life to live, and I wasn't going to let them drag me down anymore. The next few weeks were quiet. I didn't hear from anyone. No calls, no letters, nothing. And honestly, it was the best I'd felt in a long time. I focused on work, on my friends, on my life. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next message from them. I wasn't living in the shadow of their expectations anymore. And then, about a month later, I got an email. Not from my mom or my dad this time, but from Jake. It was short, just a few sentences, but it said everything I needed to know. Dad passed away last night. I thought you should know. I stared at the email for a long time, not really sure how to feel. I wasn't surprised. I knew this was coming. But I didn't feel sad either. I didn't feel much of anything, honestly. I thought about responding. I thought about calling Jake, asking how he was holding up, maybe even offering my condolences. But then I realized that this was just another step in the same cycle, another chance for them to pull me back in, and I wasn't going to fall for it this time. I closed the email without replying and went on with my day. I wasn't part of their world anymore, and I was finally okay with that. Story 6. My girlfriend of 4 years refused my proposal. At first I was embarrassed, but after my sister leaked some girl code, I kicked my girlfriend to the streets where she belongs. All right, here it goes. I'm 27M, telling this partly because I need to get it off my chest and partly because, yeah, I'm still in shock about how things turned out. I'd been with my girlfriend, Liz, 26F, for 4 years. 4 years is a pretty long time when you're with someone, you know? I really thought she was the one. We met through a friend, and honestly, we just clicked right from the start. Things were fun. Easy. Like we could talk for hours and never get bored. It's hard to find someone who just gets you like that. My family? They loved her. My mom would ask about her all the time. My dad thought she was great. And even my siblings got along with her. Liz wasn't just my girlfriend. She was, in a way, already part of the family. And it went both ways, too. I got along really well with her parents and even her little brother, who I'd sometimes hang out with when we'd all get together. I think part of me felt like we were already halfway to being a family, you know? Like it was just a matter of making it official. We'd had plenty of conversations about the future, marriage, kids, the works. Liz would light up every time we talked about it, and she'd start imagining what our wedding would look like, what kind of house we'd live in, how many kids we might have. It wasn't like these were vague one-day dreams either. We'd actually gone deep into the details sometimes, down to where we'd like to live, and even throwing around some name ideas for future kids. So yeah, I thought we were solid. I guess all this is why I never really questioned where we stood. It seemed like we were on the same page, no doubts. And when you're that sure of someone, you start to think about the next steps. So, about 6 months ago, I decided that I'd propose to her. I started saving up, looking into rings, figuring out how I'd do it to make it special. I spent months dropping little hints here and there, just to make her excited. I didn't want to give away the whole plan, but I also wanted her to know that something big was coming. I even joked about her finally being stuck with me forever. And she'd laugh and say, "I'm already stuck with you, dummy." I took that as a good sign. Fast forward to last weekend. I'd been planning this for months, right? I booked this nice resort for a weekend getaway. Something really cozy and a bit fancy. The idea was to make it a memory she'd never forget. I had the ring all ready to go, and I planned out this whole evening. Private dinner, scenic view, the works. It was going to be just us under the stars, and then I'd get down on one knee and ask her to marry me. It felt like the perfect plan. So we get to the resort, and everything's going smoothly. We're both in a good mood, enjoying the time away, and I'm thinking to myself, this is it. This is the moment I'm finally going to make it happen. I mean, the buildup was making me nervous as hell, but also really excited. That night, we go to dinner. I'd booked a private little spot where we could sit out on this balcony with a view of the water. The place was decorated really nicely with candles and lights. It was one of those settings you'd see in a rom-com, and I thought she'd be over the moon. Dinner goes great. We're chatting, laughing, reminiscing about old memories. And at one point, she's telling me this story about a time she got lost in her hometown, and we're both cracking up. I thought, this is exactly why I want to spend my life with her. She's funny. She's kind. She's got this spark that just makes life feel a little bit better, you know? So after dessert, I finally feel like, all right, it's time. I reach into my pocket, pull out the ring, and start saying all this stuff I'd rehearsed in my head a million times. Things like how much she means to me, how I can't imagine my life without her, and all the usual sappy stuff. And then I popped the question. Now I was expecting maybe some happy tears, a big yes, maybe a little jumping up and down like you see in those proposal videos. But she just freezes, like totally deer in the headlights, kind of shocked. She just stares at me, and I can feel my stomach drop. After what feels like forever, she finally says something, but it's not a yes. It's more like, can we, wait a few more months? I honestly didn't even know what to say. I just sat there, stunned. A few months? I thought we were already on the same page, but apparently I'd completely misread the situation. She goes on, trying to explain herself, saying she's not rejecting me or anything, just that she needs more time to be sure. She said she just wasn't in the right mental space at that moment, and she wanted things to feel perfect. She kept saying, "This is still a yes, it's just not an official yes yet." But that didn't make me feel any better. I just put myself out there only to be met with, "Not yet." I tried to keep it together, nodded along, and forced a smile. But inside, I was crushed. Here I was, thinking this was going to be this huge, life-changing moment, and instead I got a giant question mark hanging over my head. I felt like I'd planned all this for nothing. We ended the night with her still trying to reassure me, saying stuff like, "I love you, and I want this, but I just need a bit more time to make sure I'm fully ready." I mean, I wanted to believe her, I really did. But it's hard to stay optimistic when you've just put everything on the line, and the person you love basically says they're not sure about you. That whole night, I barely slept. I kept replaying everything in my head, wondering if there were signs I missed or if I'd rushed things. Maybe I hadn't paid attention to her hints or whatever, but from where I stood, everything seemed perfect. It was like I'd been living in some bubble, and now I was just floating around, feeling like an idiot. So yeah, that's how the perfect proposal I'd spent months planning ended up. So after that awkward, disappointing night, things were weird between us. I mean, she didn't flat out reject me, but being told she needs a few more months is not exactly what you want to hear when you're down on one knee with a ring in your hand. The next morning, we checked out of the resort, and the drive back home was tense and quiet. I think we were both trying to process what had happened, but neither of us wanted to be the one to bring it up first. I wanted to ask, "What do you mean you need more time?" But I was worried about what she'd say. I was still embarrassed, honestly, and I didn't know if I could handle more disappointment. When we got home, she kept apologizing. She'd say stuff like, "You know I love you, right? I just need a little more time to be sure." Every time she said it, it felt like she was pouring salt on a wound. I get that people can get nervous about big decisions, but this was supposed to be something we both wanted. I'd spent years with her, thinking we were on the same path, and now she was acting like she wasn't so sure. She kept trying to explain herself, saying she needed to be in the right mental space. It was honestly confusing, like, what does mental space even mean in this case? It felt like she was dancing around some reason, but wasn't giving me the full picture. Part of me wanted to ask her outright if there was something else going on, something that would make her hesitate, but I also didn't want to hear an answer I wasn't ready for. So I just kept my mouth shut and nodded along, trying to act understanding. But inside, I was feeling all sorts of things: anger, sadness, confusion. For the next few days, things felt strained. She'd act normal one minute, like everything was fine, then the next, I'd catch her looking at me with this guilty expression like she knew she'd hurt me. And yes, she did. It's hard to just brush that off and go back to normal after something like that. She'd tell me she still saw a future with me, that she still wanted us to be together, but for some reason, it just didn't feel real anymore. It's like that initial excitement I had was replaced by this constant doubt. I kept replaying the proposal in my head, thinking maybe I'd done something wrong or misjudged things. Was I moving too fast? Did I not pay attention to her signals? But we'd talked about marriage so many times before, I really didn't understand what had changed. Then, one evening, she came home from work and sat me down, like she had this big speech ready. She started talking about how she just needed a few more months to feel completely ready, as if time alone was going to make some magical change in her. She kept saying, "It's not you, it's me," and all that typical stuff. She even tried to reassure me by saying we were basically engaged, but it just didn't sit right with me. I told her, "You either want to marry me or you don't. It shouldn't be this complicated." But she brushed it off, saying she was sure about us, just not right now. Now tell me, how is anyone supposed to be okay with that? Here's this person I love and thought I'd spend my life with, telling me I'm not enough for her to make up her mind. I started getting more frustrated, feeling like I was being led on. If she wasn't ready now, what guarantee did I have that she'd be ready later? But every time I tried to bring this up, she'd start crying, saying she didn't want to lose me and that she just needed me to understand. So I felt trapped between pushing for answers and not wanting to make her more upset. It was like walking on eggshells. I wanted to demand more clarity, but I also didn't want to risk pushing her further away. I figured maybe she really does just need some time. Maybe she's genuinely overwhelmed and would come around soon, but I could feel myself starting to build a wall around my emotions. I didn't want to get hurt even more, so I started pulling back in small ways. I'd spend a little less time around her, keep conversations more surface level, and avoid talking about the future altogether. It was like I was waiting for her to make the next move, to see if she'd give me a straight answer, but nothing changed. She could tell something was off, and one night, she asked me if I was angry at her. I was tempted to say, yeah, of course I am, but I just shrugged and told her, I'm fine. She kept pushing, saying she felt like I was drifting away. I told her, I don't know what you expect. You told me you needed time, so I'm giving it to you. That shut her up, but the look on her face told me she knew exactly what I meant. She'd put our relationship in limbo, and I wasn't just going to sit there and pretend it was okay. Then there was this one evening, and it kind of felt like a breaking point. She sat beside me on the couch and started talking about this big project at work, how stressed she was, and how she just needed everything to settle down before she could fully commit. She made it sound like the stress from work was somehow tied into why she couldn't say yes to the proposal. It didn't make any sense to me, but I nodded along. I could tell she was struggling, but I didn't understand how that stopped her from wanting to marry me if she actually loved me like she said. This whole waiting game was eating at me. Every day that went by, I felt myself slipping further away from her. It was like our relationship had a timer on it now, and I had no idea how much time was left. And I guess a part of me started preparing for the worst. I started thinking, what if she never feels ready? I'd invested years into this relationship, years thinking we were heading toward the same future. And now it felt like I was left in the dark, waiting on her to figure out something I thought was already figured out. But she kept insisting she just needed time, as if that was supposed to make everything okay. And I kept trying to be understanding, but my patience was wearing thin. I'd lie in bed at night, thinking about how everything seemed so perfect just a week ago. And now, it was like I didn't even know the person next to me. It was only a matter of time before I'd reach a breaking point. But at this stage, I still hoped that things would get back on track. Alright, so at this point, I was stuck in this limbo with Liz, waiting for her to decide if she was ready to commit or not. I felt like I was getting mixed signals every day, and honestly, it was driving me insane. One minute, she'd act like everything was fine, all cuddly and sweet, and the next, she'd be distant, like she was somewhere else entirely. I didn't know what to do with myself, so I figured it'd help to talk to someone. But I wasn't exactly ready to go to my parents or friends. I mean, who wants to admit that their girlfriend of 4 years isn't sure about them? So I ended up talking to my sister. Now, let me tell you, my sister doesn't hold back. She's blunt to the point where it can be brutal, but she's also incredibly perceptive. She's got this knack for reading people and situations, and she doesn't sugarcoat anything. So I laid everything out for her: the proposal, the awkward drive back, Liz saying she needed more time, the whole shebang. And my sister's reaction? She immediately tells me, something's off here, like seriously off. At first, I thought she was just being dramatic, but she kept pressing, saying that it didn't make any sense for Liz to pull back like this after 4 years, especially when we'd talked about marriage so much already. She asked if Liz had been acting weird lately, if there were any changes in her behavior, and I said, not really, because I didn't want to sound paranoid. But then my sister hit me with something that made my stomach drop. She said, look, what Liz did? That's classic girl code for when something else is going on. When a girl suddenly hesitates on a proposal, it's usually because there's someone else in the picture and she's trying to keep her options open. I didn't want to believe it. I mean, this was Liz we were talking about. We'd been together for years and I thought I knew her better than anyone. But my sister kept going, saying that if Liz needed time to decide, then maybe she was already seeing someone else, or at least considering it. My heart sank because, deep down, I knew there were little things that hadn't added up lately. But I'd brushed them off, telling myself I was overthinking things. My sister could tell I was struggling to wrap my head around it, so she told me a story about her friend who went through something similar. This friend's boyfriend had pulled the same "I need time" card when she proposed to him. Turned out he was actually seeing someone else and didn't want to break it off until he was sure he wanted to stick with her. My sister warned me that I could be dealing with the same situation, and as much as I wanted to push that idea away, it hit too close to home. I asked her what I should do, and she told me, plain and simple, you need to dig a little. Find out if there's another guy she's hiding. You don't deserve to be stuck in this guessing game if she's not being honest with you. The thought of digging into my own girlfriend's life made me feel gross. I never imagined I'd be that guy, you know? The one who has to check up on his partner because he doesn't know if he can trust her. But my sister was right. I needed some kind of answer. If Liz was hesitating because of another guy, then I deserved to know. So I started paying more attention. I wasn't doing anything crazy like going through her phone or following her around, but I did start to notice little things. She'd get texts late at night and hold her phone a bit closer than usual, or she'd take longer than usual to grab drinks with friends after work. I tried not to jump to conclusions, but these little things started piling up, and it was like I was connecting the dots without even trying. Then, one day, she mentioned this guy from work, a new colleague who had just joined her team. She mentioned him casually, saying he was nice and fun to be around, but I noticed how her face lit up a little when she talked about him. I tried to play it cool, but my mind was racing. I started to wonder if this was the guy my sister was warning me about. My sister's voice was in my head the whole time, telling me to pay attention, to look for the signs. And as much as I hated it, I couldn't stop myself. Every time Liz would go out, I'd wonder if she was with him. Every time she'd get a text and smile down at her phone, I'd wonder if it was him. I was driving myself crazy with the suspicion, but once the thought was there, I couldn't unthink it. Finally, one night, I decided I'd had enough. I was done sitting around in silence, letting all these doubts eat me up inside. So I asked her casually about this guy from work. I made it sound like I was just curious, like I was trying to keep up with her life and friends, but she got this defensive look right away, like I'd caught her off guard. She shrugged it off, saying they were just friends and that he was cool to hang out with, but the way she reacted felt off. And that's when I knew my sister was probably right. The conversation didn't go anywhere after that. She changed the subject quickly, but I was already starting to put pieces together. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions, but there was too much that didn't add up. I couldn't stop thinking about how she needed time to decide if she was ready to be with me, but didn't seem to need time to hang out with this guy from work. The doubts turned into something darker, and I felt like I was stuck in this mess where I didn't know what was real and what wasn't. I felt sick. Here I was, considering spending my life with this person, but now I wasn't even sure if she wanted the same thing. I started to feel angry, not just at her, but at myself for not seeing it sooner, for trusting her so completely that I ignored all the signs until my sister practically had to slap me with the truth. That night, I sat alone in our living room, just staring at the wall, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do. I hadn't talked to Liz about any of this directly. I was still waiting for her to come clean on her own, hoping she'd admit something without me having to pry. But now, with all the pieces laid out, I couldn't ignore what I was seeing. I didn't have concrete proof, but deep down, I knew there was something she wasn't telling me. And now, I was stuck with this knowledge, not knowing if I should confront her or just let it play out, hoping she'd choose to be honest. But either way, things had changed between us, and there was no going back. All right, so I've got my sister's words stuck in my head, nagging me every time I see Liz. The whole girl code thing she'd explained was making more and more sense, and it got to a point where I just couldn't ignore it. I didn't want to believe Liz would do something like this, but once that seed of doubt was planted, everything she did just seemed to reinforce it. I knew I had to get to the bottom of it, or I'd drive myself crazy. I never wanted to be that guy who snoops, but I needed to know the truth. So one night while she was asleep, I grabbed her phone. I felt guilty as hell, but at this point I'd convinced myself I was just protecting myself from more hurt. I scrolled through her messages, trying not to wake her up, heart pounding like crazy the whole time. And then I saw it. Messages from the guy at her work. At first it seemed innocent enough, like friendly coworker talk, but then I kept scrolling and things got questionable. There were a few late-night messages that sounded way too flirty for just friends. He'd sent her a miss you text after some work trip they'd gone on together, and she'd replied with a me too. And that's when I knew. I mean, you don't tell someone you miss them unless there's something more going on, right? I didn't say anything to her that night. I put her phone back and just laid there, staring at the ceiling, feeling sick. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I could barely look at her. She was all chipper, acting like nothing was wrong, talking about her plans for the day, and I was just there, sitting with this feeling like a punch in my gut. The worst part? I wasn't even sure she was aware I knew. She just kept acting like everything was fine, like we were still the same couple planning a future together, and I was watching her, wondering if it was all an act. Every little thing she did started to annoy me. She'd tell me about her day, and I'd start thinking, are you really just at work, or are you spending time with him? It was eating away at me. So after a couple of days of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I asked her point blank, are you still happy with me? Like, are you sure you're not interested in anyone else? She looked shocked, like I'd just accused her of something ridiculous. She said, "Of course I am. Why would you even ask that?" But I noticed the way she got defensive, like she was holding something back. And when I mentioned the guy from work, her face changed completely. She got all flustered, stammered out something about how he was just a friend and that she didn't want me to worry. But I wasn't buying it. I told her I'd seen the messages, that I knew she'd been talking to him late at night, and that I felt like I didn't even know her anymore. She tried to brush it off, saying it was just harmless fun and that she never actually did anything with him. She kept repeating that they were just friends and that she'd never cross any lines, but her excuses were getting thinner and thinner. And then she hit me with the worst line yet. I was just confused. I didn't know if I was ready to get married or not, and he was, I don't know, a distraction. A distraction? That's all I was to her now? Some option on the side while she figured out if this guy at work was a better fit? I'd spent 4 years with this woman, and suddenly, I was nothing more than the safe choice while she flirted around with some coworker? I was furious, but at the same time, I felt completely crushed. Here I'd been, planning a future with her, only to find out she'd been wavering this whole time. She tried to apologize, saying it wasn't serious and that she'd only been talking to him because she was unsure about us. I told her, "You should have been talking to me about it, not some other guy." But she just kept saying she was confused and didn't want to hurt me, which honestly made zero sense. I needed a break, so I left the apartment and just went for a drive, trying to clear my head. I kept asking myself how it had gotten to this point. How could someone who seemed so committed suddenly just switch? And all because she didn't want to be honest with me. My sister's warning was right. Liz was keeping her options open, waiting to see if this guy was worth it before making a final choice. And the worst part? I was the backup plan. After my drive, I came back, and Liz was waiting for me, looking miserable. She'd been crying, but instead of feeling bad for her, I just felt numb. She begged me to understand, kept saying she was sorry, and that she knew she'd messed up. She promised to cut things off with him, to focus on us, and tried to convince me that she was ready to commit. But how was I supposed to believe her? Every promise she made felt hollow. I didn't know what to say, so I just told her I needed time to think, and I went to bed. I could hear her crying in the other room, but I was too drained to care. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I could ever trust her again. Every memory I had of our relationship was tainted by what I'd just found out. I kept asking myself if I'd been a fool the entire time, believing in this perfect future with someone who wasn't even sure about me. The next morning, Liz was all over me, trying to make things right. She made breakfast, kept hugging me, telling me she loved me and that she'd fix this. But it was like I was looking at a stranger. I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd already betrayed me, even if she claimed she hadn't done anything physical. Emotional cheating is still cheating, and I'd felt completely replaced in her life. She kept texting me throughout the day, sending these long messages about how she was going to end things with the guy and how she'd make it up to me. But it was too late. I'd already started to detach bit by bit, walling off the feelings I had for her. Once that trust is broken, it's like there's a fracture that no amount of apologies can heal. That night, she sat down with me and swore up and down that she was going to prove herself to me, that she'd cut off contact with him for good, and that she was finally ready to be with me fully. She had tears in her eyes, and she seemed desperate, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just her backup, the safe choice she'd keep around while her other options fell apart. I sat there staring at her, feeling this mix of anger and disappointment, knowing that no matter what she said, things would never be the same. So after everything came out, things didn't magically get better. I wish I could say that her promises and apologies made me feel better, but they didn't. I could tell she was trying, and yeah, she stopped texting that guy and was all about showing me that she was committed. But I couldn't get past what had happened. It was like every time I looked at her, all I saw was someone who'd kept me as her backup plan. It didn't matter what she said now. The trust was gone, and I didn't know if I could get it back. Then came the part I wasn't expecting. About 2 weeks after her whole tearful confession, I thought things were finally calming down. I was still unsure, but I was giving her space to prove herself, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. Then she came home one night looking absolutely furious. She threw her bag on the table, barely even looked at me, and just blurted out, "He was cheating on me too!" I didn't even know what to say. It was like the irony slapped us both in the face and the room went dead quiet. Turns out she'd been talking to one of her friends who also worked with that guy, and they let it slip that he'd been seeing someone else the whole time he was messing with her. I could see the anger and hurt in her eyes, but instead of feeling sympathy, I just felt nothing. Here she was, crying and upset because her side fling had done the exact same thing she'd done to me. The whole thing was just ridiculous. She started ranting about how she couldn't believe he'd betrayed her, how he was such a liar, and that she felt humiliated. And all I could think was, yeah, welcome to the club. She finally looked over at me, expecting me to say something, maybe comfort her, I don't know. But I just sat there, staring at her, wondering if she even realized the irony of it all. Then she got all quiet, like she was finally piecing together how messed up the whole situation was. She sat down across from me, took a deep breath, and said, I'm sorry, really. I don't know what I was thinking. I should have never, I should have never doubted what we had. And then she did the thing I was dreading. She asked me to give her another chance, a real one. She wanted to start over, wanted me to propose to her again, this time with her full commitment. I think she genuinely thought that would fix everything, that we could just hit reset and everything would magically be okay. But I'd already checked out. Her words were just noise at that point, and I think she could see it in my face. I told her, you already made your choice. You wanted him, and when he let you down, you came back to me. I'm not some consolation prize, Liz. You can't just throw me aside when you're unsure and then come back when it's convenient. She started crying again, saying she didn't mean it that way, that she just got caught up in something she didn't understand. But I was done. I told her, I can't spend my life with someone who isn't sure about me. If I'm not enough for you now, I never will be. She begged, trying to convince me that she was finally sure, that she'd made a mistake, but I wasn't having it. I couldn't trust a word coming out of her mouth. She'd shown me her true colors, and I couldn't unsee that. She tried to hug me, but I stepped back, and that's when the anger came out. She started accusing me of giving up too easily, saying I was throwing away everything we'd built over one mistake. She tried to guilt trip me, saying I should at least fight for us, but that just made me angrier. I told her, you're the one who threw us away when you couldn't even decide if you wanted to be with me or some other guy. I'm not going to sit around waiting for you to figure out if I'm enough. I could see her getting defensive, but she didn't have anything to say back. She knew she'd messed up, but instead of just accepting it, she tried to make it my fault too. Like I was the bad guy for not wanting to stick around and be her backup. So I told her it was over. I said I wanted her to pack her stuff and leave. She looked at me like I'd just slapped her, totally shocked, like she never expected I'd actually end it. She started crying, saying she had nowhere to go, that she didn't think I'd kick her out, but I was done. I told her, you can stay with your friend or find somewhere else. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like everything's okay. You made your choices and I'm making mine. She cried, begged me to reconsider, but I stood my ground. I wasn't going to let her twist this around and make me feel guilty for finally standing up for myself. After a while, she got the message. She called a friend to come pick her up, and while she was packing, I just sat there, feeling a weird mix of relief and sadness. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but I knew this was her own doing. When her friend showed up, she grabbed her bags, looked at me one last time and said, I hope you find someone who can make you happy. And then she left. Just like that, 4 years together, gone. I didn't know what to feel. A part of me wanted to break down, but another part felt this strange freedom, like I'd finally taken back control of my life. After she left, I blocked her number and deleted all our pictures. I didn't want any reminders of the mess she'd made. It hurt, yeah, but it also felt like a weight off my shoulders. I'd spent so long thinking she was the one, only to realize she didn't value me the way I valued her. And I knew I couldn't go back, even if I wanted to. It's been a few days now, and I'm still processing everything. Some moments I feel angry at her. Other moments I'm angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. But I know this was the right decision. I deserve someone who actually wants to be with me, not someone who has to test the waters before making up their mind. So yeah, that's how it ended. Not with some grand goodbye or big showdown, just a quiet, messy end to something I thought was going to be my future. It's not easy, but I know I made the right choice. Update. It's been about a month since Liz packed up and left. I've done my best to move on, but every now and then I hear updates through mutual friends or people who still keep in touch with her. The latest? Apparently karma came back around, and it hit her hard. Not long after she left, she tried staying with her friend who'd picked her up, but it didn't last. That friend had just enough patience to help Liz out at first, but eventually, the drama got old. I guess Liz leaned on her a little too much, and her friend had her own stuff to deal with. She wasn't about to keep being Liz's fallback plan forever. After getting the boot from there, Liz had no choice but to go back to her parents' place. And from what I've heard, that didn't go well either. Turns out, Her parents were pretty disappointed when they found out what she'd done. They'd liked me, and they didn't appreciate finding out how she messed things up with someone they thought was a good match for her. I guess they realized how much of a mess she'd made and didn't want to deal with the fallout. They told her to get her act together, but she couldn't hold down a place to stay, or really show them she'd learned anything. Eventually, they told her she needed to find somewhere else to live. So now she's basically out on her own with nowhere to go. The guy she'd messed around with at work? He's long gone and has already moved on, according to her friend. She's tried reaching out to a few other people, but most of them are done with the drama and just want to keep their distance. She's learned, the hard way, that you can't keep treating people like options without consequences. Part of me feels a little sorry for her, but not enough to do anything about it. She made her choices. She decided to throw everything we had away to chase something that clearly wasn't worth it. And now, she's left dealing with the fallout. I've heard she's been bouncing between random places, trying to find somewhere to crash, and I won't lie. There's a certain satisfaction in knowing she's facing the consequences of her actions. It's funny how things work out sometimes. A few months ago, I would have done anything for her. And now, I don't feel much at all. Just a sense of relief that I got out before I wasted even more time on someone who didn't value what we had. I'm moving forward, and I'm not looking back.